They say the weakest wolves die first. I used to believe that too, until the night my own mate stood before our entire pack and declared I was worth less than the dirt beneath his boots. My name is Luna Kaelin Vale, and I survived what was meant to destroy me. This is the story of how the girl they threw away became the queen they'd learned to fear. Stay with me until the end. You'll want to see how this plays out. Drop a like and comment your city below if you're ready to watch the weakest wolf become the most dangerous predator alive. Papas. The Great Hall of Black Hollow reeked of wet fur and wood smoke. Kaelin stood in the center of the stone floor, her thin dress doing nothing against the February cold that seeped through the walls. 200 wolves surrounded her in a circle that felt more like a noose than a gathering. Their eyes glowed amber in the firelight, hungry and cruel, waiting for the spectacle to begin. Alpha Riker Thorn sat on the elevated throne at the far end, his massive frame draped in black furs that made him look like death itself. His jaw was cut from granite, his dark hair pulled back to reveal the ritual scars that marked his ascension to power 5 years ago. Beside him sat Beta Marcus and Gamma Lorne, both wearing expressions of bored contempt. They'd seen this before. Weak wolves brought before the Alpha. Weak wolves cast out. Weak wolves forgotten. But this was different. This was the Luna. Kaelin's hands trembled at her sides. She forced them still. The pack could smell fear like blood in water, and she'd given them enough satisfaction already. Her left cheek still throbbed from where Riker had struck her 3 days ago. The bruise, a ugly purple-green stain that no amount of her body's slow healing could fade quickly. She'd learned long ago that her wolf was defective. Couldn't shift properly. Couldn't heal fast. Couldn't do much of anything except make her a target. Riker rose from his throne, each movement deliberate and theatrical. He knew how to work a crowd. His voice boomed across the hall, cutting through the low murmurs. You all know why we're gathered here tonight. The crowd went silent. Even the children stopped squirming. For 3 years, I took Kaelin Vale as my Luna. 3 years I gave her the honor of standing beside the Alpha of Black Hollow. 3 years I waited for her to prove herself worthy of that title. He descended the steps slowly, his boots echoing on stone. Kaelin wanted to run, wanted to disappear. But there was nowhere to go. The circle of bodies pressed closer, a living wall of judgment. Riker stopped 10 feet from her, his massive shoulders blocking out the fire behind him. She had to crane her neck to meet his eyes. Once those eyes had looked at her with something almost like kindness. Now they held nothing but disgust. She has failed at every turn, he continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. When rogues attacked our eastern border last spring, where was our Luna? Hiding in the pack house while warriors bled and died. When the winter sickness swept through the elder dens, where was our Luna? Too weak to help carry supplies, too fragile to offer any real comfort. And when I needed an heir, a strong wolf to carry on the Black Hollow bloodline, what did she give me? He let the question hang in the air. Kaelin felt her throat closing. She'd known this was coming, had felt it building for months like a storm on the horizon. But knowing didn't make it hurt less. Nothing, Riker said. And the word hit like a physical blow. 3 years of nothing. No pups. No strength. No honor. She is a stain on this pack and a joke to every territory that hears the name Black Hollow. They laugh at us because I was fool enough to bind myself to the weakest female ever born to wolf blood. Laughter rippled through the crowd, sharp and vicious. Kaelin's vision blurred. She would not cry. Would not give them that. A voice called out from the crowd. It was Senna Blackwood, one of the pack's elite warriors, and a female who'd made no secret of her desire to replace Kaelin. Her red hair caught the firelight as she stepped forward, her body all lean muscle and lethal grace. Alpha Riker, she said, her voice honeyed poison. If I may speak, we all know the Luna has brought nothing but misfortune. Since she was bound to you, we've lost 2 major hunting grounds to rival packs, suffered 3 rogue attacks, and watched our reputation crumble. Perhaps the moon herself is punishing Black Hollow for harboring such weakness. The crowd murmured agreement. Someone spat on the ground near Kaelin's feet. She didn't flinch. Wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Riker nodded slowly, as if considering Senna's words for the first time, though Kaelin knew this was all planned. Every word rehearsed, every moment choreographed for maximum humiliation. You speak truth, Senna, Riker said. He turned his full attention back to Kaelin. His voice dropped lower, intimate in its cruelty. I made a mistake 3 years ago. I thought you could become something more. Thought the mate bond might awaken whatever pathetic wolf hides inside you. I was wrong. You're not just weak, Kalen. You're cursed, and I won't let you drag this pack down any further." He raised his right hand. The hall went deathly quiet. "By the authority granted to me as Alpha of Black Hollow, witnessed by the pack and sanctioned by the old laws, I hereby reject you as my mate and Luna. Kalen Vale, you are cast out. Stripped of rank, stripped of protection, stripped of the bond that tied you to me and this pack. From this moment forward, you are nothing. You are no one. You are rogue." The words landed like an axe. Kalen felt something tear inside her chest, the mate bond severing with physical force. She gasped, stumbling backward. The pain was worse than any beating, worse than any insult. It felt like her soul was being ripped in half. Riker stepped forward and backhanded her across the face. She went down hard, her cheek hitting the cold stone. Blood filled her mouth, copper and salt. The crowd roared its approval. "Get out," Riker said, standing over her. His boot pressed against her shoulder, grinding her into the floor. "Take nothing. Speak to no one. If you're still in Black Hollow territory by dawn, I'll let the warriors hunt you for sport. Maybe that's what you're good for after all. Pray." More laughter. Louder now. Kalen pushed herself up on shaking arms. Blood dripped from her split lip, spattering on the stone. She looked up at Riker one last time. His face was carved from ice. No regret, no hesitation, just cold, absolute certainty that she was worthless. Something shifted inside her. Not her wolf. That pitiful thing still cowered somewhere deep. But something else. Something that whispered, this wasn't the end. This was the beginning. She stood. It took everything she had, but she stood. Met Riker's eyes without flinching. Her voice came out rough but steady. "You'll regret this." The words weren't a plea, weren't a threat, just a statement of fact. Riker's expression didn't change. He turned his back on her. "Get her out of my sight." Two warriors grabbed her arms, Cole and Darren, males she'd known since childhood. They dragged her toward the main doors. The crowd parted, still jeering, still laughing. Someone threw a cup of ale that splashed across her dress. Someone else tried to trip her. The massive oak doors swung open. February air hit like a slap. Snow had started falling, thick white flakes that swirled in the darkness beyond the torchlight. The warriors threw her down the stone steps. She tumbled hard, landing in a snowdrift at the bottom. Pain flared up her spine. Behind her, the doors slammed shut. The sound echoed across the empty courtyard. Then silence. Nothing but wind and snow and the vast, terrible darkness of the northern wilderness stretching out forever. Kalen lay there for a long moment, face pressed into the snow. It numbed her split lip, numbed everything. Part of her wanted to stay there, let the cold take her, let the wolves or the bears or the simple mercy of winter finish what Riker started. But that whisper came again. Not yet. Not like this. She pushed herself up. Her dress was soaked through, already starting to freeze. She had no coat, no boots except the thin slippers she'd worn to the ceremony, no supplies, no weapons. Nothing but the broken mate bond screaming in her chest and the certainty that staying near Black Hollow meant death. She started walking. North. Away from the packlands, away from the territories she knew, into the deep wilderness where even the bravest wolves feared to hunt. Her teeth chattered violently. Her feet were already going numb. But she walked. The snow fell heavier. Within an hour, it had covered her tracks. Within 2 hours, she could no longer feel her legs. The forest around her was absolute darkness. No moon, no stars, just trees like skeletal fingers reaching up into nothing. She stumbled over roots she couldn't see. Fell twice. Got up both times because stopping meant dying, and she wasn't ready for that yet. By the 3rd hour, she started seeing things. Shapes moving between the trees. Voices calling her name. Her mother's face floating in the darkness. Mouth open in a scream that never came. She died when Kalen was 12, killed by rogues during a raid. Her father had blamed Kalen, said she'd been too weak to warn them in time. He died 2 years later, bitter and full of rage at the daughter who'd survived when better wolves hadn't. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was cursed. She fell again. This time getting up was harder. Her hands were blue. She couldn't feel them anymore. couldn't feel anything except the cold and the bone-deep exhaustion that made her want to sleep. Just sleep. Just rest for a moment. No, the whisper said. Get up. She tried. Her legs wouldn't work. She crawled instead, dragging herself forward through the snow. Blood from her hands left dark trails behind her. Still she crawled. Because stopping meant accepting everything they'd said. Accepting she was nothing. Accepting she was weak. And something inside her, stubborn and burning and absolutely refusing to die, wouldn't accept that. The ground dropped away suddenly. She rolled, tumbling down a steep embankment. Branches tore at her clothes and skin. She hit the bottom hard, landing in a frozen creek bed. Ice cracked beneath her, freezing water soaked through what was left of her dress. That was it. She was done. Couldn't move anymore, couldn't think. The cold was inside her now, turning her blood to ice. She lay there in the creek, staring up through the bare branches at the sky. Snow fell on her face, each flake distinct and perfect before it melted against her skin. She thought about Riker, about the pack, about every moment of her life spent trying to be enough and failing. About the warriors who'd mocked her, the females who'd sabotaged her, the children who'd thrown stones and called her names. About 3 years bound to a mate who'd looked at her like she was garbage. Tears froze on her cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of rage. If she died here, they won. They got to be right. Got to tell stories about the weak Luna who couldn't even survive being cast out. Got to forget her like she'd never mattered at all. She wouldn't give them that. With the last scraps of strength left in her body, she dragged herself out of the creek. Her arms shook so badly she could barely support her own weight. But she moved, inch by inch, until she was clear of the water. Then she collapsed on the bank, panting, her breath coming in ragged clouds. That's when she heard it. Footsteps. Multiple sets moving through the trees above her. New fear spiked through the exhaustion. Rogues. Had to be. This far from pack territories, nothing else made sense. They'd kill her or worse. Either way, she was dead. The footsteps came closer, voices now, speaking in low tones. A language she didn't recognize. Not the common wolf tongue. Something older. Harsher. Figures appeared at the top of the embankment, 4 of them, massive shapes wrapped in dark furs. Torchlight gleamed off weapons, spears and long knives that looked like they'd tasted blood recently. One of them knelt, examining the blood trail she'd left. Found her, the figure said. A female voice, deep and cold as winter itself. She's still alive. Barely, another voice said. Male this time. Look at her. She won't last another hour. Should we finish it? The first figure, the female, stood and started down the embankment. The others followed. Kaylin tried to move, tried to run, but her body wouldn't respond. She could only watch as they approached, their faces coming into view in the torchlight. They were wolves. She could see it in the way they moved, the amber glow of their eyes. But they were different from any wolves she'd known. Taller, more heavily built. Their faces marked with ritual scars that formed patterns she'd never seen before. They wore armor beneath their furs, leather and metal that looked ancient and battle-worn. The female crouched beside her. Her face was severe, all sharp angles and hard lines. A scar ran from her left temple down to her jaw. Her eyes were the coldest amber Kaylin had ever seen. She studied Kaylin for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice carrying an accent that turned the words strange. What pack are you from, little wolf? Kaylin tried to answer. Her mouth wouldn't work. The female reached out and pressed 2 fingers against Kaylin's throat, checking her pulse. Her bond's been severed recently, the female said to the others. See the mark? Someone cast her out. One of the males snorted. Explains why she's half dead in the middle of nowhere. Probably couldn't hack it. Weak bloodline. The female's eyes narrowed. She leaned closer, her face inches from Kylan's. Her nostrils flared as she breathed in deep. Then her expression changed. The cold certainty cracked, replaced by something that looked almost like shock. No, she said softly. Not weak. Dormant. What? The female straightened. Her hand moved to one of her knives. For a terrible moment, Kaylin thought she was about to die. But the female just held the blade up, letting the torchlight catch the metal. There was writing etched along the blade. Symbols Kaylin had never seen. This one carries old blood, the female said. Very old. She doesn't know it yet. Neither did whoever cast her out. But I can smell it now that she's close to death. The barriers are breaking down. One of the other warriors moved closer, examining Kaelin with new interest. Are you certain, Commander? The female nodded slowly. As certain as I've ever been. She turned back to Kaelin. What's your name, little wolf? Kaelin managed to force the word out through numb lips. Kaelin. Full name. Kaelin Vale. The female exchanged glances with the others. Something passed between them. Some understanding Kaelin couldn't grasp. Vale, the female repeated. From the Southern Territories? Kaelin managed a nod. The female stood. She sheathed her knife and turned to her warriors. We're taking her back. Commander, one of them protested. We're 3 days from the fortress. She'll die before we... Then we move fast, the female cut him off. If what I suspect is true, she's worth more than all of us combined. The elders will want to see this. But she's dying now. The female crouched again. She pulled a small vial from inside her furs, unstoppered it. Liquid the color of blood gleamed inside. She tilted Kaelin's head back and poured it between her lips. Swallow, she commanded. Kaelin's throat worked automatically. The liquid burned going down, harsh and bitter. But almost immediately, warmth began spreading through her chest. Not much, not enough to truly fight the cold, but enough to pull her back from the edge. That'll keep her alive, the female said. Barely. She looked down at Kaelin one more time, and there was something in her expression that might have been respect. You're tougher than you look, Kaelin Vale. Let's see if you're tough enough to survive what comes next. She gestured to the others. One of them scooped Kaelin up like she weighed nothing. The world spun. Darkness crowded the edges of her vision. She felt herself being carried up the embankment, felt the steady rhythm of the warrior's stride as they began moving through the forest at impossible speed. The last thing she saw before unconsciousness took her was the female commander's face, illuminated by torchlight, watching her with those cold amber eyes that seemed to see straight through to whatever was hidden inside her soul. Then nothing but darkness and the fading echo of the commander's words. Old blood. Very old. What did that mean? And why did everyone who'd known her, everyone who'd judged her and found her wanting, why had none of them ever seen it before? The questions followed her down into unconsciousness. But beneath them, underneath the pain and exhaustion and the raw wound of rejection, something else stirred. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time. Something that was finally beginning to wake up. Kaelin woke to pain that felt like her entire body had been torn apart and stitched back together wrong. Every muscle screamed. Her skin burned despite the cold air touching it. She tried to move and immediately regretted it when white-hot agony shot through her ribs. Don't. The voice was female, sharp as a blade. Kaelin forced her eyes open. Stone ceiling above her, rough-hewn and dark. Torchlight flickered from somewhere to her left. The air smelled of smoke and something medicinal that made her nose wrinkle. She turned her head slowly. The movement made her vision swim. The female commander from the forest sat on a wooden stool beside the bed, arms crossed, watching her with those cold amber eyes. Up close and in better light, Kaelin could see more details. The commander was probably in her 30s, her face weathered by years of warfare and northern winters. Her hair was black as pitch, braided tight against her skull in a warrior's style. The scar running down her face looked deliberate, ritualistic. You've been out for 4 days, the commander said. Her accent made the words sound clipped and foreign. We weren't sure you'd wake up. Most wolves who get that close to death don't come back. Kaelin's throat was so dry she could barely speak. Where am I? Shadowfang territory. 300 miles north of wherever you came from. The commander leaned forward slightly, her gaze intense. I'm Commander Vera Ashenblade. You're in the northern fortress, and before you ask your next question, no, you can't leave. Not yet. Fear cut through the pain. Kaelin tried to sit up. Her body refused. I don't want trouble. Just let me go. Vera's expression didn't change. You were dying in a frozen creek bed wearing nothing but a torn dress. Where exactly would you go? The question hung in the air. Kaelin had no answer. Vera seemed to know it. That's what I thought, Vera said. She stood, moving to a small table where a clay pitcher sat. She poured water into a cup and brought it over. Drink. You're dehydrated. She helped Kaelin sit up enough to swallow. The water hurt going down, but it was the best thing Kaelin had ever tasted. When the cup was empty, Vera set it aside and studied her again. Tell me what happened, Vera said. Why was Aluna cast out in the middle of winter with nothing? Kaylin's jaw tightened. It's none of your business. Wrong answer. Vera's voice went colder. You're alive because I decided you were worth saving. That makes it my business. Now talk. Something in her tone made it clear this wasn't a request. Kaylin had spent 3 years learning when to bend and when to break. This was a bending moment. My mate rejected me, she said, the words tasting like ash. In front of the whole pack, said I was too weak, that I'd brought nothing but misfortune. So he cast me out. And you believed him? The question caught Kaylin off guard. Everyone believed him. I couldn't shift properly, couldn't heal fast, couldn't do anything right. I was the weakest wolf in Black Hollow. Vera made a sound that might have been a laugh but held no humor. Weakest. She shook her head. Did it ever occur to you that you weren't weak? You were suppressed? What? Your bloodline, little wolf. It's been dormant, probably for generations, sleeping so deep that it looked like absence, like weakness. But dormant isn't the same as gone. Kaylin stared at her. You said something like that in the forest. Old blood. What does that mean? Vera was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried weight. Thousands of years ago, before the packs fractured and territories formed, there were ancient bloodlines. The first wolves. They were powerful enough to make modern alphas look like pups. Most of those bloodlines died out. Wars, disease, interbreeding with weaker stock. But some survived, hidden in descendants who never knew what they carried. She moved back to her stool, her eyes never leaving Kaylin's face. You carry one of those bloodlines. I could smell it on you when your barriers were breaking down from hypothermia. Bale. That name meant something once, a long time ago. Kaylin's heart pounded against her ribs. You're saying I'm what? Special? That's insane. If I had some powerful bloodline, it would have shown up by now. Not if it was bound. Bound? Locked away. Sealed. Either by someone who knew what you were and feared it, or by your own bloodline's defense mechanism when the pack environment became hostile. Vera leaned back. Old blood doesn't wake up for weakness, Kaylin. It wakes up for survival. When you were dying in that creek, your body made a choice. Unlock or die. You started unlocking. Kaylin wanted to argue. Wanted to call it madness. But something deep inside her stirred at Vera's words. That whisper that had kept her moving through the snow. That stubborn flame that refused to die even when dying was easier. If that's true, she said slowly, why tell me? Why not just let me go? Because Shadowfang doesn't waste potential. Vera's expression hardened. We're not like the southern packs. We don't judge wolves by how they start. We judge them by how they finish. You want to survive? You want to become something more than the broken Luna they threw away? Then you train. You learn. You unlock whatever's sleeping inside you. And maybe you become strong enough to make them regret what they did. The words hit like a physical blow. Not because they were cruel, but because they offered something Kaylin hadn't dared hope for. A chance. Not to go back to being what she was, but to become something entirely new. What if I fail? Kaylin asked. What if I'm just as weak as they said? Then you die. Vera said it matter-of-factly, like discussing the weather. But at least you'll die trying. That's more than most wolves manage. Kaylin met her eyes, held that cold amber gaze. In it she saw no pity, no sympathy, just brutal honesty and a challenge that made her blood heat despite the pain. When do we start? Kaylin asked. Vera smiled. It wasn't a kind expression. As soon as you can stand without falling over. Welcome to Shadowfang, little wolf. Hope you survive what comes next. 2 weeks later, Kaylin stood in a training yard that looked more like an execution ground. Snow covered everything in a white blanket that hid the bloodstains underneath. 20 warriors formed a loose circle around the perimeter, watching with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. Vera stood at the far end, arms crossed, face unreadable. Kaylin's ribs were mostly healed now, though they still ached when she moved too fast. She'd been eating constantly, thick stews and roasted meat and dark bread that the fortress kitchens produced in quantities that seemed impossible. Her body was responding faster than it ever had before, healing quicker, getting stronger. But she was still pathetically weak compared to the warriors surrounding her. "First lesson," Vera called out. "Survival isn't about being the strongest. It's about being too stubborn to die. Today we test your stubbornness," she gestured. A male warrior stepped forward from the circle. He was massive, easily 6.5 feet of solid muscle. His name was Darius, and he'd made his opinion of Kaylin very clear over the past 2 weeks. Soft, useless, a waste of resources. "Shift," Vera commanded. Kaylin's stomach dropped. She'd tried to explain that she couldn't shift properly, that her wolf was broken. But Vera had just stared at her with those cold eyes and said, "Then you'll learn." Now Darius was shifting. His body cracked and reformed with practiced ease. Within seconds, a massive gray wolf stood where the man had been, easily 3 times the size of any wolf Kaylin had seen in Black Hollow. His eyes glowed amber and his teeth were white daggers. "Your turn," Vera said. Kaylin closed her eyes, reached for her wolf, found that pitiful thing cowering somewhere deep inside. She'd spent years trying to coax it out, years failing, years being mocked for the pathetic half-shifts she could sometimes manage. Her body would start to change and then just stop, leaving her caught between forms and helpless. She tried anyway. Felt the familiar resistance, the wall that always stopped her. She pushed against it. Nothing happened. "I can't," she said, opening her eyes. "I told you, it doesn't work. Try harder. There's nothing to try. It's—" Darius attacked. He moved faster than should have been possible for something that size. Kaylin barely had time to throw her arms up before he hit her like a battering ram. She flew backward, landing hard in the snow. Pain exploded through her shoulder. She rolled, gasping. Darius circled back for another pass. Kaylin scrambled to her feet. Her shoulder screamed, but she ignored it. He came at her again. This time she managed to dodge, throwing herself sideways. His jaws snapped closed inches from her throat. "Shift!" Vera's voice cut through the chaos. "Or die trying!" Kaylin's heart hammered. She could feel blood running down her arm where Darius had clipped her. This wasn't training. This was execution. He was going to kill her. Terror flooded her system, but underneath it, that other thing stirred. That whisper, that flame. No, she wouldn't die here. Wouldn't let them see her fail again. Wouldn't give anyone else the satisfaction of being right about her. She reached for her wolf again. Found that wall. And instead of trying to coax it down like she'd done for years, she hit it with everything she had, with all the rage and humiliation and pain of 3 years spent being nothing, with the memory of Riker's face as he rejected her, with the sound of the pack laughing as she was thrown into the snow. The wall cracked. Something poured through, raw and ancient and absolutely furious. Kaylin's body convulsed. This wasn't like her old half-shifts. This was agony. Her bones broke and reformed. Her muscles tore and rebuilt. Her skin split and healed. She screamed, but the sound came out as something between human and animal. When it was over, she stood on 4 legs for the first time in her life. The world looked different, smelled different. Everything was sharper, clearer, more intense. She could hear heartbeats from 50 feet away. Could smell Darius's confidence and Vera's satisfaction and the shock radiating from every warrior in the circle. She looked down at herself. Her wolf wasn't large by Shadowfang standards, maybe half Darius's size. But her coat wasn't the dull brown she'd expected. It was silver white, bright as fresh snow with black markings that traced patterns she didn't recognize. Darius snarled. Apparently the shift didn't earn her any mercy. He charged again. This time Kaylin moved with him. Not away. Toward. She was smaller, but she was faster. She ducked under his attack and snapped at his foreleg. Caught fur and flesh. Tasted blood. He howled and spun. She was already moving, circling, looking for openings. They fought for what felt like hours but was probably minutes. Kaylin took hits that would have killed her old self. A bite to her flank that made her stumble. A slash across her face that filled her eye with blood. But she kept moving, kept fighting, because stopping meant losing, and losing meant proving them all right. Finally, Vera's voice rang out. Enough. Darius backed off immediately, shifting back to human form. He was bleeding from a dozen wounds, his expression a mixture of surprise and grudging respect. Kaylin stayed in wolf form, panting, her legs shaking from exhaustion. "Shift back," Vera commanded. Kaylin didn't know how. The shift into wolf had been pure instinct and fury. Shifting back required control she didn't have. She whined, a sound she immediately hated for its weakness. Vera walked over, knelt in the snow beside her, put one hand on Kaylin's silver-white head. Her voice dropped lower, intimate and commanding. "You already know how. Your body knows. Stop thinking. Just let go." Kaylin closed her eyes, let go of the fear, let go of the need to control, just breathed and trusted that her body would follow. The shift back was slower but less painful. When it was done, she collapsed in the snow, naked and shaking and covered in blood that was freezing in the winter air. Someone threw a fur over her. She pulled it tight, her teeth chattering. Vera stood, looking down at her. The commander's expression was unreadable. "You shifted. First time in your life, I'd wager." Kaylin managed a nod. Her throat was too raw to speak. "That wolf of yours," Vera continued, "isn't weak. It's been caged. The question is whether you're strong enough to keep it awake now that it's tasted freedom." She turned to address the watching warriors. "This one stays. She trains with the rest of you. Anyone has a problem with that? Take it up with me." No one spoke. Several of the warriors were looking at Kaylin differently now. Not with respect, not yet, but with something closer to curiosity. She'd proven she could bleed and fight and survive. In Shadowfang, that apparently mattered. Vera walked away. Darius offered Kaylin a hand up. She took it, letting him haul her to her feet. He studied her for a moment, his expression neutral. "Not bad," he said. "For a first shift? Next time I won't hold back." "You held back?" Kaylin's voice came out hoarse. He smiled. It wasn't friendly. "You're still alive, aren't you?" He left. Kaylin stood there in the snow, wrapped in a fur, her body one massive ache. But underneath the pain was something she hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. Pride. She'd done something they said was impossible. Shifted when she'd been told her whole life she couldn't. Fought a warrior who could have killed her and survived. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Months blurred together. Winter gave way to a brutal spring that felt colder than the snow. Kaylin trained every day from before dawn until after dark. Hand-to-hand combat, weapons work, pack tactics, strategy. Every session left her bloody and exhausted and wanting to quit. She never did. Vera pushed her harder than anyone else. No mercy, no exceptions. When Kaylin failed, which was often, Vera made her do it again until she succeeded or passed out. When she succeeded, Vera immediately raised the difficulty. There was no winning, no arrival, just constant forward pressure that would have broken most wolves. Kaylin thrived on it. She sparred with Darius and lost every time but lasted longer each round. She learned to fight with knives from a scarred female named Kira who moved like water and hit like stone. She studied strategy with an old warrior named Garrett, who'd survived 40 years of border wars and had the scars to prove it. She learned the old wolf tongue, the harsh northern dialect that hurt her throat to speak but made her sound dangerous. And slowly, gradually, her body changed. Muscle replaced softness. Her reflexes sharpened. Her wolf became easier to reach, no longer cowering but waiting, ready, hungry for the fight. The silver-white coat remained strange to her, but the other warriors started calling her Snowfang as a nickname. Some meant it as mockery. Others used it with something approaching respect. 6 months after arriving at Shadowfang, Kaylin stood in Vera's office. It was a sparse room, functional and cold, like everything else in the fortress. Maps covered one wall. Weapons hung on another. Vera sat behind a desk made from a single slab of dark wood, reviewing reports. "You wanted to see me?" Kaylin asked. Vera looked up, gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit." Kaylin sat. She'd learned not to argue with direct commands. Vera respected strength, but punished stupidity. And arguing with your commander was definitely stupid. "The elders want to meet you," Vera said without preamble. "Tomorrow, at dawn." Kaylin's stomach tightened. The elders. She'd heard whispers about them over the past months. The ancient wolves who truly ruled Shadowfang, who made decisions about bloodlines and power, and who lived or died. Vera commanded the warriors, but the elders commanded everything. "Why?" Kaylin asked. "Because 6 months ago you were a broken Luna who could barely shift. Now you're one of my better fighters. Because your wolf's markings match patterns in the old texts. Because they want to see if their suspicions about your bloodline are correct. And if they're not, then you keep training. Vera's expression gave nothing away. And if they are, then everything changes. The elders met in a chamber deep beneath the fortress, carved from living stone and lit by torches that burned with blue flame. 3 of them sat on raised seats that looked more like thrones than chairs. 2 males and 1 female, all old enough that their hair had gone white and their faces carried the weight of centuries. They wore simple robes, but power radiated from them like heat from a forge. Vera had escorted Kaelin down. Now she stood slightly behind and to the left, silent and watchful. Kaelin stood in the center of the chamber, acutely aware that she was being studied by creatures who could probably kill her without moving. "Kaelin Vale," the female elder said. Her voice was surprisingly strong for someone who looked ancient. "You have survived your first season in Shadowfang. Commander Ashenblade speaks well of your progress." "Thank you, Elder." Kaelin kept her voice steady, kept her posture respectful but not cowering. Vera had taught her that elders respected strength but despised weakness. The male elder on the left leaned forward. His eyes were pure silver, unsettling in their intensity. "Shift for us." It wasn't a request. Kaelin stripped off the simple tunic she wore. By now she'd lost any shame about nudity around other wolves. Shifting required it. She closed her eyes, reached for her wolf, and let it come. The shift was smoother now, faster, less painful. Within seconds she stood on 4 legs, her silver-white coat gleaming in the blue torchlight. The elders leaned forward as one. The third elder, who hadn't spoken yet, made a gesture. "Approach." Kaelin walked forward on silent pause, stopped 5 feet from the raised seats. The third elder descended, moving with a grace that belied his apparent age. He circled her slowly, studying every marking on her coat. Then he reached out and placed one gnarled hand on her head. Power slammed through her. Not painful, but overwhelming. She felt him rifling through her bloodline, reading it like a book written in her bones. Every ancestor. Every fragment of power passed down through generations. It felt like being stripped naked from the inside out. Then it was over. The elder stepped back, his silver eyes wide. He looked at the other 2, spoke in the old tongue, words too fast for Kaelin to follow with her limited vocabulary. But she caught a few. Vale. First blood. Ancient line. Unbroken. The female elder stood. Her voice carried absolute authority. "Shift back, child." Kaelin obeyed. When she was human again, standing naked and trying not to shake, the female elder descended as well. She looked at Kaelin with an expression that might have been wonder or might have been fear. "Do you know who the Vales were?" the elder asked. "No," Kaelin admitted. "My parents never spoke of it. I thought we were nothing special. The Vales were the first." The female elder's voice dropped lower. "Before the Great Fracture, before the territories formed. There were 7 bloodlines that led all wolves, 7 families powerful enough to command armies and bend lesser packs to their will. The Vales were one of those 7. Their gift was survival. No matter what happened, no matter how many died, there was always one Vale who endured, who adapted, who rose from ashes stronger than before." She reached out and tilted Kaelin's chin up, forcing eye contact. "Your bloodline didn't die. It hid, slept, waited for the moment when it would be needed again. And when you were cast out and left to die, it woke up. Because that's what Vales do. They survive." Kaelin's mind reeled. This couldn't be real. If her bloodline was that powerful, someone would have known, would have seen it. But even as she thought it, she remembered things. Her mother's strange eyes. Her grandmother's stories about ancestors who'd survived things that should have killed them. Fragments she'd dismissed as fairy tales. "What does this mean?" Kaelin asked. "What happens now?" The third elder spoke for the first time. His voice was rough as gravel. "Now you train not as a warrior, but as a queen. Now you learn to command the power sleeping in your blood. Now you become what you were always meant to be." "And what's that?" He smiled. It was not a comforting expression. Something your former pack will learn to fear. 2 years passed like a fever dream. Kaelin trained with the elders themselves, learning things she'd never imagined possible. How to tap into her bloodline's power. How to command other wolves through sheer force of will. how to fight not just with claws and teeth, but with the ancient magic that all First Blood wolves could access when they knew the way. It was harder than anything Vera had put her through. Most days she collapsed, drained beyond exhaustion. Some days she failed completely, unable to touch the power no matter how hard she tried. But slowly, gradually, she improved. Her body changed again. She grew taller, leaner. Her muscles took on the dense quality of a predator built for endurance. Her eyes shifted from brown to silver amber, a mark of First Blood awakening. Her wolf grew larger each time she shifted, until she stood nearly as tall as Darius and moved with speed that made even Vera pause. But the physical changes were nothing compared to what happened inside. The broken meek Luna who'd been cast out was gone, burned away in the forge of constant trial. What remained was harder, colder, absolutely certain of one thing: she would never be weak again, never be helpless, never be at someone else's mercy. The fortress itself seemed to recognize the change. Warriors who'd once looked through her now moved aside when she walked past. When she spoke, people listened. When she gave orders during training exercises, they were obeyed instantly. She wasn't just another warrior anymore. She was becoming something else. Something that made even battle-hardened fighters nervous. Vera noticed. They were sparring one afternoon when the commander suddenly stopped mid-strike, looked at her with an expression Kaylin had never seen before. "What?" Kaylin asked, breathing hard. 2 years ago, you could barely stand after one round, Vera said quietly. Now you're pushing me back. Is that a problem? No. Vera lowered her weapon. But it's a reality you need to understand. You're not just strong now, Kaylin. You're dangerous. The kind of dangerous that makes alphas nervous and pack politics deadly. The elders are talking about your next step. Which is? Going back. The words hit like a punch. Kaylin's blood went cold. Back where? South. To the territories. To see what's happening in the packs you left behind. Vera's expression was unreadable. 2.5 years is a long time. Things change. Packs rise and fall. Black Hollow might not even exist anymore. Good, Kaylin said flatly. Let it burn. Maybe. Vera studied her. Or maybe you're meant to be the one who decides its fate. The elders think it's time for you to test yourself outside Shadowfang, to see if you can survive in the wider world, to see if you're truly ready to claim your bloodline's legacy. Kaylin was quiet for a long moment. Part of her wanted to refuse, wanted to stay in the fortress where she was safe and strong and no one could touch her. But a larger part, the part that had been forged in snow and blood and absolute refusal to break, knew Vera was right. Staying here forever meant hiding, and she was done hiding. When do I leave? Kaylin asked. 1 month. Vera's voice was firm. Use it to prepare, because once you walk out those gates, you're not just a Shadowfang warrior anymore. You're a First Blood walking among lesser wolves. Some will want to serve you, some will want to kill you, and some, she paused, some will want you to save them. I'm not a savior. No. But you are a survivor, and sometimes that's the same thing. The month passed too fast. Kaylin spent it gathering information from traders and scouts who passed through Shadowfang. The southern territories were in chaos. 3 major packs had collapsed in the past year. Rogue armies were growing bolder. Resources were scarce. And Black Hollow, her old pack, was barely holding on, hit by repeated attacks, suffering from famine, led by an alpha who'd apparently lost his edge. Riker. Hearing his name after 2.5 years made something twist in Kaylin's chest. Not longing, not affection, just a cold, calculated interest in the fact that the male who'd thrown her away was now drowning in the same weakness he'd accused her of carrying. The elders summoned her 3 days before she was set to leave. This time they met her in one of the fortress's viewing chambers, a room with massive windows that looked out over the northern mountains. Snow covered everything in white, broken only by dark stone and skeletal trees. Kaylin Vale, the female elder said, you came to us broken. You leave us whole. But wholeness is not the end, it's the beginning. She gestured, and one of the younger warriors brought forward a bundle wrapped in dark cloth. The elder unwrapped it carefully. Inside was armor, unlike anything Kaylin had seen. Black leather reinforced with steel plates that bore the same ancient markings that covered her wolf form. It looked both functional and ceremonial, built for protection and for making a statement. This belonged to your bloodline, the elder said. We've kept it safe for centuries, waiting for a veil who could claim it. She held it out. It's yours now. Wear it as a reminder of what you are and what you're becoming. Kaylin took the armor. It was surprisingly light despite the metal. She could feel power humming through it, old magic woven into every seam and plate. Thank you, Elder. Don't thank us yet. The third elder stepped forward. You're being sent south for a reason, not just to test yourself, to reshape what's coming. The old pack structures are failing, the territories are fragmenting, and in that chaos, something new can be born, or everything can die. What do you want me to do? Survive. The elder's silver eyes bored into hers. And if you find yourself in a position to build something better than what came before, build it. The world doesn't need more weak alphas running packs into the ground. It needs leaders who understand that true strength isn't about domination. It's about endurance. Kaylin nodded slowly. She understood now. This wasn't just about her. It was about her bloodline's purpose. Vels survived so they could rebuild, could create something that lasted when everything else burned. 2 days later, Kaylin stood at the fortress gates. She wore the ancient armor over simple traveling clothes, carried weapons she'd trained with for 2 years. Her silver-white hair, another change from the awakening, was braided tight in the Shadow Fang style. She looked nothing like the broken Luna who'd been carried through those same gates dying and hopeless. Vera stood nearby with Darius and Kira and several others who'd become something close to friends over the past years. The commander's expression was as unreadable as always, but there was something in her eyes that might have been pride. Remember what I taught you, Vera said. Trust your instincts. Don't let compassion make you stupid, and if you end up ruling a pack someday, she smiled slightly, don't be as much of a bastard as the alphas you're replacing. I'll try, Kaylin said. Vera reached out and gripped her shoulder. It was the closest thing to affection the commander had ever shown. You'll do more than try. You're a veil. It's in your blood to survive what breaks everyone else. She stepped back. The massive gates began to open, pulled by chains and winches operated by guards in the towers. Beyond them lay the road south, the wilderness, the territories, everything Kaylin had left behind. She took a breath, started walking, didn't look back. Because looking back meant doubt, and doubt meant weakness. And she'd spent 2.5 years burning every trace of weakness out of her soul. The gates closed behind her with a boom that echoed across the mountains. Kaylin walked south into spring sunlight that felt strange after years in the north. The road ahead wound through forests and hills that would eventually lead to pack territories, to Black Hollow, to Riker, and everyone who'd watched her be thrown away. They thought they'd seen the last of her, thought she'd died in the snow, thought the weak Luna was just another casualty of pack politics and their own cruelty. They were about to learn how wrong they'd been, because Kaylin Vale was coming home, not as a rejected mate, not as a powerless Luna, but as something the Southern Territories had never seen before and wouldn't know how to handle. A First Blood warrior carrying the weight of an ancient bloodline and absolutely nothing left to lose. The journey south took 3 weeks. Kaylin moved through territories that felt both familiar and alien. The forests were the same, but she saw them differently now. Every broken branch told a story. Every scent marked territory or threat. Her Shadow Fang training had turned the wilderness into a language she could read fluently. She avoided packlands when possible, kept to the neutral zones and rogue territories where questions weren't asked. The few wolves she encountered gave her a wide berth. Something about the way she moved, the armor she wore, the silver-amber eyes that marked her as different. It made even hardened rogues think twice about approaching. But news traveled fast in the wolf world. By the second week, she started hearing whispers. A silver wolf moving south. A warrior in black armor bearing markings no one recognized. Some said she was a mercenary. Others claimed she was a scout for the northern clans. A few, the older wolves who remembered the old stories, wondered if she might be something else entirely. Kaylin let them wonder. Information was power, and anonymity was a weapon. The longer people didn't know who she really was, the more options she had. She crossed into what used to be Black Hollow territory on a gray morning that smelled like rain. The border markers were still there, but they looked neglected, old. Several had fallen over completely. Pack scent was faint and stale, marked weeks ago instead of daily like it should have been. Either Black Hollow had grown weak, or they'd pulled back their boundaries. Both options were interesting. Kaylin made camp in a cave overlooking what used to be the pack's northern hunting grounds, built a small fire, ate dried meat, and considered her next move. She hadn't come south with a plan beyond seeing what remained of the pack that cast her out, beyond understanding what Riker had become in the years since he'd thrown her away. That night she dreamed of the rejection ceremony, standing in the Great Hall, Riker's face carved from ice, the pack laughing, the taste of blood in her mouth. But in the dream, when Riker struck her, she didn't fall. She caught his wrist mid-swing, looked him in the eye, and watched his expression shift from contempt to fear. She woke before dawn with her heart racing. The dream felt less like memory and more like prophecy, like her bloodline showing her what was coming. By mid-morning, she'd packed up and moved closer to Black Hollow's central territory. She needed information before making any moves, needed to understand the pack's current state, their weaknesses, their fractures. She found her answer in a small settlement at the edge of Packlands. More of a refugee camp than anything else. Dozens of wolves living in makeshift shelters, looking half-starved and desperate. Most wore Black Hollow markers, but they were old and faded. These were pack members who'd been pushed to the margins, abandoned. Kaylin walked into the camp openly. Let them see her. Let them wonder. An older female approached first, her body language wary but not hostile. She had the look of someone who'd once been strong, but had been worn down by years of hardship. "You're not from around here," the female said. Her voice was rough from disuse. "No." Kaylin kept her tone neutral. "Just passing through, looking for information about Black Hollow." The female's expression soured. "Nothing good to tell. Pack's falling apart. Has been for 2 years now. Alpha Riker's losing his grip, lost 3 major conflicts with rival packs. Territory's shrunk to half what it was. Food's scarce. Warriors are deserting. Why stay then? Where else would we go?" The female gestured at the camp. "We're the ones too old or too weak to fight, too young to survive alone. Riker doesn't care about us anymore. Barely remembers we exist. He's too busy trying to hold on to power while his Beta and Gamma plot against him." Kaylin filed that information away. Internal conflict, power struggles. The pack was rotting from the inside. What about the Luna? The female laughed bitterly. "There is no Luna. Riker rejected his mate years ago, threw her out to die. Since then, he's gone through 3 different females trying to find someone worthy. None of them lasted. One died in childbirth. One ran away. The current one, Senna Blackwood, she's ambitious but not strong enough to actually lead. Mostly she just schemes with whoever will listen. Senna, the red-haired warrior who'd spoken against Kaylin at the rejection ceremony, the one who'd wanted to replace her. Apparently she'd gotten her wish. Kaylin wondered if it had been everything Senna hoped for. "Is Riker in the main pack house?" Kaylin asked, "when he's not out trying to salvage what's left of his reputation." The female studied her more carefully. "Why do you want to know?" "Curious." Kaylin met her eyes steadily. "I've heard stories about Black Hollow, wanted to see if they were true. They're worse than the stories." The female's expression softened slightly. "If you're smart, stranger, you'll keep moving. This place is cursed, has been since the old Luna was cast out. Everything went wrong after that night." "Why?" "No one knows. Some say she put a curse on Riker before she died. Some say the pack broke sacred laws by rejecting a true mate. Some just think we got what we deserved for being cruel." The female shrugged. "Doesn't matter why. Just matters that Black Hollow is dying. Give it another year and there won't be anything left to rule." Kaylin thanked her and moved on. Spent the rest of the day observing from a distance, watching patrol patterns, noting how few warriors Black Hollow had left, seeing the way pack members moved with defeat in every step. This wasn't just a pack in decline. This was a pack that had given up. The question was whether she cared. She'd spent 2.5 years training to be strong enough that no one could hurt her again, had unlocked power that made her dangerous to even the most ruthless alphas. She could walk away right now, head deeper south, find a territory where no one knew her name, build a life where the past didn't matter. But something kept her here. Not sentiment, not residual attachment to a pack that had destroyed her. Something colder and more calculated. Black Hollow was vulnerable, wounded. And vulnerable packs were opportunities for wolves who knew how to seize them. The elders had sent her south to test herself, to see if she could survive and possibly build something new from the ashes of the old world. Black Hollow was ashes waiting to be shaped. The question was what she wanted to shape them into. She was still considering when 3 wolves found her camp that night. They came quietly, but not quietly enough. Kaylin heard them 100 yards out, smelled them at 50. By the time they entered the small clearing where she'd built her fire, she was standing with her hand on one of the knives Kira had taught her to use. The lead wolf was male, heavily scarred, wearing Black Hollow markers. Behind him were 2 younger males who looked nervous. They stopped at the edge of the firelight, their eyes reflecting orange. "You've been asking questions about our pack," the scarred male said. His voice carried the rough authority of someone used to giving orders. "I'm Garrett, head of what's left of Black Hollow's guard. You want to explain what your interest is?" "Just gathering information," Kaylin said evenly. "No law against that in neutral territory. You're camped on our border. That makes it our business." Garrett's eyes narrowed. "You don't smell like a rogue. You don't move like one either. What are you? A traveler, carrying Shadowfang steel and wearing armor that predates most living packs?" Garrett took a step closer. His expression was more curious than hostile. "Try again." Kaylin considered her options. She could lie, could kill them if necessary, or she could use this as an opening. Information flowed both ways, and Garrett clearly had intelligence she could use. "I'm someone who used to know Black Hollow," she said carefully. "Someone who left and wants to understand what happened since." Garrett studied her for a long moment. Then recognition flickered across his face. His eyes widened. He took a step back. His hand moved to his weapon. "No," he said. "It's not possible." "What's not possible?" One of the younger males looked confused. Garrett ignored him. His eyes stayed locked on Kaylin. "You're dead. Riker said you died in the wilderness. We searched for 3 days and found nothing. You didn't search very hard." Kaylin kept her voice flat. "Probably because no one actually wanted to find me." The other 2 males were catching on now, staring at her with expressions that mixed shock and fear. One of them took a defensive stance. The other looked like he wanted to run. "Kaylin Vale," Garrett said slowly. "The rejected Luna. Except you don't look anything like her. That girl was weak, couldn't shift, could barely defend herself. You," he gestured at her. "You're something else entirely." "People change when they're forced to survive," Kaylin said. "Now I'll ask you something, Garrett. Why are you still loyal to a pack that's collapsing? Why haven't you left like apparently half the warriors did?" Garrett's jaw tightened. "Because leaving makes you rogue. Because I've spent 30 years serving Black Hollow. Because walking away from that means admitting it was all for nothing." Maybe it was. The words hung in the air like a blade. Garrett's expression darkened, but he didn't argue. Couldn't argue. Because they both knew she was right. "What do you want?" Garrett asked finally. "Revenge? To watch Riker suffer? To spit on the pack that threw you away?" "I don't know yet." Kaylin moved around the fire, getting a better angle. "But I'm here, and I'm not leaving until I understand what Black Hollow has become. You want to see for yourself?" Garrett's voice carried a challenge. "Then come to the pack house tomorrow. There's a gathering. All remaining pack members. Riker's trying to rally support before the Crestmoon pack attacks our eastern border again. It'll be a perfect opportunity for you to see exactly how far we've fallen." "Why would you invite me?" "Because maybe you're what we need." Garrett's expression was unreadable. "Maybe the pack's been cursed since you left. Maybe having you back breaks it. Or maybe you'll just kill Riker and put us all out of our misery. Either way, things can't get worse than they already are." He turned and walked away. The other 2 males followed, still looking shaken. Kaylin watched them disappear into the darkness. Her mind raced with possibilities. This was happening faster than she'd expected. The pack was so broken that even their head guard was willing to gamble on a rejected Luna returning from the dead. She sat back down by the fire, stared into the flames. Tomorrow she'd walk back into the place that had destroyed her. Would stand before wolves who'd mocked her and laughed at her pain. Would face Riker again after 2.5 years of transformation. Part of her was terrified. The old part. The Luna who'd been too weak to fight back. But that Luna was dead. Burned away in Shadowfang's training yards. What remained had nothing to fear from Black Hollow. If anything, they should fear her. The pack house looked worse than Kaylin remembered. The stone walls were crumbling in places. Wooden shutters hung askew. The grounds that had once been immaculate were overgrown and neglected. This wasn't just a pack in decline. This was a pack already dead and waiting for someone to notice. Kaylin approached openly in late afternoon, wore her armor, carried her weapons, made no attempt to hide who or what she was. Let them see her coming. Let them panic. The guards at the entrance were young, barely trained. They stared at her with wide eyes but didn't move to stop her. One of them turned and ran inside, probably to raise the alarm. The other just stood there, looking terrified. Kaylin walked past them without a word, entered the pack house through the main doors. The interior was just as deteriorated as the exterior, furniture broken or missing, tapestries torn. The smell of decay and desperation thick in the air. She followed the sound of voices to the great hall, the same hall where she'd been rejected, the same stone floor where her blood had dripped, the same throne where Riker had sat in judgment. The hall was maybe a third full, 50 wolves at most where there used to be 200. They turned as she entered. The conversations died instantly. Every eye locked on her. Kaylin walked down the center aisle. Her boots echoed on stone. She let them look. Let them see what she'd become. Let the reality settle over them like a shroud. At the far end, Riker sat on his throne. He looked terrible, thinner than she remembered, his face lined with stress. His dark hair shot through with gray despite being only 32. He stared at her like she was a ghost, like reality had fractured and his worst nightmare had walked through the door. Beside him sat Senna Blackwood. The red-haired warrior looked older too, harder. Her expression cycled through shock, fear, and calculation in rapid succession. On Riker's other side stood Beta Marcus and Gamma Lorne, both looking like they'd aged a decade in 2.5 years. Kaylin stopped 20 feet from the throne, met Riker's eyes, watched him try to process what he was seeing. "Hello, Riker," she said, her voice carried to every corner of the hall. "Miss me? You're dead." Riker's voice came out hoarse. We searched. You died in the wilderness." "Disappointed?" Kaylin smiled. It wasn't a kind expression. "Sorry to ruin your convenient narrative, but as you can see, I'm very much alive." Senna stood abruptly. Her voice was sharp with panic. "This is a trick. Some kind of illusion or—" "I'm real." Kaylin's voice cut through the denial. "Real enough that every wolf in this hall can smell me. Real enough that your precious Alpha looks like he's about to vomit. Real enough that you're all wondering how the weak Luna you threw away came back looking like this." She turned slowly. Let them see the armor, the weapons, the way she carried herself now. Nothing like the broken girl they remembered. "What do you want?" Marcus asked. His hand was on his weapon. "Revenge? Maybe." Kaylin turned back to Riker. "Or maybe I just wanted to see what happened to the pack that valued strength over everything else. Wanted to see if you were stronger without me." She gestured at the half-empty hall. "Looks like you really thrived." Riker finally found his voice. It came out harder, more like the Alpha he used to be. "You have no right to come here. I cast you out. You're rogue. The pack laws—" "Your pack laws mean nothing," Kaylin interrupted. "Black Hollow is barely a pack anymore. Half your warriors are gone. Your territory is shrinking. Rival packs are circling like vultures. You're dying, Riker, slowly and painfully, and everyone here knows it." The hall erupted, wolves shouting denials, others shouting agreement. The pack was fracturing in real time, their fragile unity destroyed by the simple truth of what Kaylin represented. Proof that everything they'd believed about strength and weakness had been wrong. Riker slammed his fist on the throne's armrest. The sound echoed like thunder. Silence fell immediately. He stood. Even diminished, he was still physically imposing, still carried the aura of an Alpha who'd ruled for years. "You want to challenge me?" he asked, voice dropping to something dangerous. "Want to fight for pack, right? Is that why you came back?" "No." Kaylin's answer clearly caught him off guard. "I didn't come back to challenge you, Riker. I came back to watch you destroy yourself, because that's what you're doing. What you've been doing since the night you rejected me." She took a step closer. Riker's hand moved to his weapon, but he didn't draw. Couldn't. Because somewhere in his failing Alpha instincts, he recognized that fighting her now would end badly. "You blamed me for everything," Kaylin continued. "Said I was weak, said I brought misfortune. Cast me out thinking it would solve your problems. How'd that work out? Did the pack get stronger? Did your reputation improve? Or did everything just get worse? Riker's jaw clenched. His eyes blazed, but he had no answer, because they both knew the truth. It wasn't me, Kaelin said quietly. The words carried weight that pressed down on everyone present. I wasn't the problem. You were. Your cruelty, your pride, your inability to see value in anything that didn't fit your narrow definition of strength. You broke sacred bonds, rejected your true mate, and the pack has paid the price ever since. That's superstition, Lorne said. His voice shook slightly. Mate bonds don't work that way. Rejecting her shouldn't have what? Kaelin turned on him. Shouldn't have consequences? Shouldn't have meaning? She looked around the hall. Every face was pale. Every wolf was listening. The old laws say that rejecting a true mate brings misfortune, that breaking sacred bonds weakens the pack from the inside. You all thought those were just stories. Turns out they were warnings. This is absurd, Senna said. But her voice lacked conviction. Even she could see the pattern. Everything had gone wrong after that night. Believe what you want, Kaelin said. I'm just here to deliver a message. Black Hollow is finished. Not because of me, because of choices you all made. Because you valued brutality over loyalty. Because you destroyed anything that seemed weak instead of nurturing it into strength. This pack is exactly what it deserves to be. Broken. She turned to leave, got 3 steps before Riker's voice stopped her. Wait, Kaelin paused, didn't turn around. What would you have us do? Riker asked. His voice had changed, lost the commanding edge, sounded almost desperate. If you're right, if we brought this on ourselves, how do we fix it? The question hung in the air. Kaelin considered not answering, considered walking out and leaving them to their fate. But something made her turn, made her look at the pathetic remains of a pack that had once been powerful. You can't, she said simply. Not as you are. Black Hollow is poison. The structure is rotten. The bloodlines are corrupted by generations of cruelty. The only way forward is to tear it all down and build something new from the ground up. And you'd lead that? Marcus asked, voice heavy with skepticism. You'd take over Black Hollow? Kaelin laughed. It was a harsh sound. I don't want Black Hollow. I don't want anything from this place. I just wanted you to see what you created. Wanted you to understand that strength without wisdom is just violence, and violence always consumes itself eventually. She walked toward the doors. This time no one stopped her. The hall was silent except for her footsteps. She'd almost reached the exit when Garrett appeared from a side entrance, the scarred guard who'd found her camp. He moved to intercept her. What now? Kaelin asked. There's something you need to know, Garrett said quietly. Something no one else has told you yet. Which is, Riker isn't the only one who's been waiting for you. Garrett's expression was grim. There are others. Wolves from different packs who've heard rumors about a silver warrior, about old bloodlines waking up, about first blood wolves returning to the world. Some of them want to ally with you. Some want to kill you before you become a threat. And some, he paused, some want to use you. Use me how? That's what you needed to find out. Garrett glanced back at the hall. This gathering tonight? It wasn't just about rallying the pack. There are visitors. Representatives from 3 other territories. They came to assess Black Hollow's weakness, but now they know you're here, and that changes everything. Kaelin's blood went cold. She'd walked into a trap without knowing it, had exposed herself to rivals who would spread word about her return, about what she'd become. Anonymity was gone. The advantage of surprise was gone. She'd thought she was in control, but she'd just made herself a target. Where are these representatives now? She asked. Being hosted in the guest quarters. Garrett's voice dropped lower. But they'll be watching you leave. We'll be deciding what to do about you. My advice? Don't leave alone tonight. Some of those wolves don't care about honor or neutral ground. If they decide you're a threat, they'll eliminate you the first chance they get. Kaelin's mind raced. She could fight her way out if needed, but that would just confirm she was dangerous, would make her a target for every pack in the South. Alternatively, she could stay, could use this as an opportunity to understand the political landscape. But staying meant playing games she wasn't prepared for yet. She was still deciding when Senna appeared at the top of the hall's entrance steps. The red-haired female looked shaken but determined. She descended slowly, her eyes locked on Kaelin. We need to talk, Senna said. Alone. Garrett looked at Kaelin. She nodded. The old guard moved away but stayed close enough to intervene if needed. Senna stopped a few feet from Kaelin, her expression unreadable. I owe you an apology, Senna said quietly. The words clearly cost her. For what I said at your rejection ceremony, for supporting Riker, for wanting to replace you. Little late for that, Kaelin said flatly. I know. Senna's voice was steady despite the tension. But I need you to understand something. When you were cast out, I thought I was doing the right thing. Thought the pack needed strong leadership. Thought you were the weak link. She paused. I was wrong. About what? About everything. Senna's eyes were bright, but no tears fell. The pack didn't get stronger when you left. It got weaker. Everything we blamed on you, the raids, the famine, the losses, they all got worse. And Riker, she glanced back at the hall. He's not the same. Something broke in him that night, like he knew he'd made a terrible mistake, but was too proud to admit it. And you're telling me this why? Kaelin kept her voice cold. So I'll feel sorry for him? So I'll help save a pack that destroyed me? No. Senna met her eyes. I'm telling you because there are wolves here, good wolves, who don't deserve to suffer for Riker's mistakes, who are trapped in a failing pack with nowhere to go. If you have power now, if you're what people are saying, then maybe you can do what Riker never could. Lead without cruelty. I'm not a leader, Kaelin said. Neither was I. Senna's smile was bitter. But I tried anyway. Failed spectacularly. Because I'm not strong enough, and I'm not smart enough, and I definitely don't have whatever you've become. But you, she gestured at Kaelin, you survived being thrown away, came back powerful enough that even Riker is afraid of you. That's not weakness. That's exactly what this dying world needs. Before Kaelin could respond, shouts erupted from inside the hall. Then screams, the sound of fighting, breaking furniture, snarls and growls that meant wolves were shifting. Garrett appeared at the doors, his face pale. We've got a problem. The representatives. They're attacking. Not just each other. They're going after Riker. It's an assassination attempt. Kaelin's instincts screamed at her to run. This wasn't her problem. Black Hollow deserved whatever happened. But something made her move forward instead of back. Made her rush up the steps and back into the hall. Chaos. 3 groups of warriors fighting in a 3-way brawl. Pack members caught in the middle, being torn apart. Riker was surrounded, fighting desperately against 2 massive wolves who'd clearly come prepared to kill. Senna was already shifting, trying to reach him. Marcus and Lorne were down, bleeding. This was the moment. The choice that would define everything that came next. Kaelin could let Riker die. Could watch Black Hollow's final collapse. Could walk away clean. Or she could fight. Could reveal the full extent of what she'd become. Could save wolves who'd once mocked her, and in doing so, change the entire trajectory of what happened next. She thought of Vera's words. Sometimes surviving means deciding what's worth saving. She thought of the Elder's mission, reshape what's coming, build something new. She thought of her own reflection in the frozen creek, the girl who'd refused to die because dying meant they'd won. Kaelin shifted. The transformation was instant now, smooth and powerful. Her silver-white wolf burst forward, larger than any wolf in the hall. The ancient markings on her coat glowed faint blue in the firelight. She howled once. The sound carried power that made every wolf freeze mid-strike. Then she charged into the fight. Not to save Riker specifically, but to stop the slaughter, to prevent the chaos from consuming everyone present. She hit the first assassin like a battering ram, knocked him clear across the hall, turned and caught the second by the throat. Her jaws closed. She didn't kill, but the message was clear. Anyone who wanted to continue this fight would go through her first. The assassins retreated, regrouped, realized too late what they were facing. The other visiting wolves pulled back as well, their expressions showing shock and recognition. They'd heard rumors about First Blood wolves. Now they were seeing one in person. Kaelin shifted back to human form, stood there naked and covered in blood that wasn't hers. Her voice came out amplified by the power thrumming through her bloodline. Enough! The hall went silent. Every wolf, pack member, visitor, assassin, stared at her with expressions ranging from awe to terror. You came here to kill an alpha who's already dying, Kaelin said. Her voice carried to every corner. Congratulations. You've proven you're exactly as pathetic as he is. She turned slowly, making eye contact with each group. This pack is finished. We all know it. But this? She gestured at the carnage. This is cowardice. If you want Black Hollow's territory, challenge for it honorably. If you want to eliminate Riker, do it in fair combat. But this assassin bullshit? This is beneath even the lowest rogues. One of the visitors stepped forward, a scarred female who radiated alpha power. And what are you going to do about it, First Blood? Stop all of us? If I have to. Kaylin's eyes blazed silver amber. But I'd rather you all made smarter choices. Walk away tonight. Spread word about what happened here. Let every pack know that Black Hollow is under my protection now. Anyone who wants to challenge that can come find me. We'll settle it the old way. Blood and honor. The female alpha studied her for a long moment. Then she laughed. It was genuine amusement. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. She looked at her warriors. Pull back. This one's not worth dying over tonight. The other groups followed suit. Within minutes, the visitors had withdrawn, leaving behind their wounded but taking their dead. The hall emptied until only pack members remained. They stared at Kaylin with expressions that mixed fear, hope, and desperate gratitude. Riker pulled himself up from the floor. He was bleeding from a dozen wounds but alive. He looked at Kaylin like he was seeing her for the first time. Why? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. Why save me? Kaylin turned to face him fully. I didn't save you. I saved them. She gestured at the pack members. They don't deserve to die because you're a failure. They don't deserve to be slaughtered because you're too weak to protect them. She walked closer until she stood directly in front of him, looked up at the male who'd once towered over her, who'd struck her and thrown her away, who'd destroyed her life without hesitation. Black Hollow is mine now, she said quietly, every word carrying absolute certainty. Not because I challenged you, not because I want it, but because I'm the only thing standing between this pack and complete annihilation. You can keep your title, keep your throne, but everyone in this hall knows the truth. You're alpha in name only. The real power belongs to whoever's strong enough to wield it. She turned to address the watching wolves. Anyone who wants to leave, go now. No judgment, no pursuit. Find another pack or go rogue. I don't care. But if you stay, things change. The old ways are done. Cruelty isn't strength anymore. We rebuild this pack properly, or we let it die. No one moved. Even the wolves who'd been planning to desert were staying. Because whatever Kaylin had become, it was magnetic. It was powerful. It was exactly what a dying pack needed to believe in. Senna stepped forward. She'd shifted back to human form, her red hair matted with blood. What do you need from us? Loyalty, Kaylin said. Not to Riker, not to me, to each other. To the idea that we can be better than what we were. She looked at Senna directly. Can you do that? Can you follow someone who was once weaker than you? Senna held her gaze, then dropped to one knee, placed her fist over her heart. A formal pledge. I can. One by one, other wolves followed, dropping to their knees, pledging allegiance, not to an alpha through force, but to a leader through choice. Garrett was among them. Even some of the older warriors who'd watched Kaylin be rejected were kneeling now, their expressions showing shame and desperate hope for redemption. Only Riker remained standing. He stared at the kneeling wolves, at his pack choosing someone else, at the absolute collapse of everything he'd built his identity around. Then he did something Kaylin never expected. He knelt, slowly and with visible agony, but he knelt. His voice, when he spoke, was broken. I was wrong about you, about everything. If you can save this pack where I failed, then it's yours. Kaylin looked down at him, at the male who'd destroyed her, who'd mocked her, who'd thrown her away believing she'd die. Part of her wanted to grind his face into the stone, wanted to make him feel every ounce of pain he'd caused. But revenge was empty. The elders had taught her that. Real power wasn't about hurting those who'd hurt you. It was about building something they could never touch. Stand up, Riker, she said. Her voice was surprisingly gentle. You're not my enemy anymore. You're just, she paused, broken. Like this whole pack, like everything in the South, and broken things either heal or die. We're going to find out which one you are. She turned to the others. Tomorrow we start rebuilding. Tonight you rest. Tend your wounded. Mourn your dead. And prepare yourselves. Because what comes next won't be easy. We've got rival packs circling, winter approaching, resources we don't have. But we also have something they don't. We have a reason to survive that's bigger than fear. What reason? Someone called out. Proving that wolves don't have to be monsters to be strong, Kaylin said. Her eyes blazed. Proving that the old ways were wrong, and proving that the rejected Luna they threw away wasn't weak. She was just waiting to become the queen they'd never deserve but desperately need. The hall erupted in howls, not of fear or pain, but of hope. Wild and fierce and absolutely defiant. They were a broken pack choosing to believe in an impossible thing, choosing to follow a wolf who should have been dead. Kaylin stood at the center of it all and felt the weight of what she'd just accepted. She'd come south to test herself, to understand what remained of Black Hollow, to see if revenge felt satisfying. Instead, she'd found something worse than enemies. She'd found responsibility, for broken wolves who had nowhere else to go, for a pack that would die without her, for a future that depended on whether she could be the leader they needed instead of the weapon Shadowfang had forged her to become. As the howling continued, as wolves pledged themselves to her cause, as Riker knelt broken at her feet, Kaylin realized the truth. She hadn't come back to Black Hollow to watch them suffer. She'd come back to see if the girl they'd destroyed could save them despite everything they'd done. And now she'd find out if transformation cut deep enough to turn a rejected Luna into a queen who could reshape an entire world, or if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life by choosing compassion over revenge. Dawn came cold and unforgiving. Kaylin stood on the pack house balcony watching the sun bleed red across the horizon. She hadn't slept. Couldn't sleep. Her mind was racing with logistics and strategy and the weight of 300 wolves who now looked to her for survival. 300 lives that would end if she made the wrong call. The balcony door opened behind her. Garrett approached, his scarred face grave in the early light. We've got movement on the eastern border. Scouts just reported back. Crest Moon Pack. At least 500 warriors. They're mobilizing for a full assault. Kaylin's jaw tightened. When? 2 days. Maybe less. Garrett moved beside her, looking out at the territory that stretched to the tree line. They know we're weak, know our numbers are down. This is their chance to take everything we've got left. How many warriors can we field? Maybe 80 who can actually fight. Another 40 who are recovering from last night. The rest are too young, too old, or too broken. Garrett's voice was flat. We're outnumbered 6-1. Standard tactics won't work. Then we don't use standard tactics. Kaylin turned to face him. What do we know about Crest Moon's Alpha? Tyrion Blackridge. Ruthless, ambitious, smart enough to wait until we were at our weakest before making his move. He's been absorbing smaller packs for the past year, building an empire. Black Hollow is just his next acquisition. Does he know about me? By now? Definitely. Word spreads fast. He'll know a first blood returned. Know you stopped the assassination attempt. Question is whether he believes you're a real threat or just a story we're using to buy time. Kaylin smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Then we make him believe. Send a message under white flag. Tell him I want to meet. Neutral ground. Just the two of us and our seconds. Before any blood gets spilled. That's suicide. If he decides to violate the white flag, then he proves he's exactly the kind of alpha who needs to be removed. Kaylin's eyes were cold. Besides, I don't plan on dying. I plan on showing him exactly what happens when someone underestimates a veil. Garrett studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I'll send the messenger. But Kaylin, if this goes wrong, the pack falls apart. No one else can hold it together. You understand that? I understand. The weight of it pressed down like physical force, which is why it won't go wrong. The meeting was set for noon in a clearing 3 miles from Black Hollow's border. Neutral ground witnessed by representatives from smaller packs who served as guarantors. Violating a white flag meeting would earn immediate condemnation from every territory in the South. It was one of the few sacred laws that still held weight. Kaylin arrived early with Garrett and Senna flanking her. She wore her Shadowfang armor polished to a dark shine, carried weapons openly, wanted Tyrion to see exactly what he was dealing with. Crest Moon arrived 15 minutes later. Tyrion Blackridge was everything the report suggested. Massive, easily 6'5" of solid muscle. His face was brutal and handsome in the way of predators. Dark hair pulled back in warrior braids, eyes that calculated everything they saw. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a real fight. Behind him walked his beta, a scarred female named Kessa, who looked like she ate weaker wolves for breakfast. Both of them studied Kaelin with expressions that mixed curiosity and contempt. "So you're the dead Luna," Tyrion said. His voice was deep and carried easy authority. "Have to admit you look better than I expected for a corpse." "Funny." Kaelin kept her tone neutral. "You look exactly like I expected for an alpha who picks fights with dying packs." Tyrion laughed. It was genuine amusement. "I like you already. Most wolves trying to intimidate me go for threats. You just went straight for the insult. Refreshing. Glad to entertain you. Now let's talk about why you're mobilizing 500 warriors to crush a pack that's barely holding together." "Why?" Tyrion's expression hardened. "Because that's what strong packs do. We expand. We absorb the weak. We build something that lasts. Black Hollow has been circling the drain for 2 years. I'm just speeding up the inevitable. And the wolves living there? The ones who've done nothing to you? Collateral damage." Tyrion said it matter-of-factly. "Some will join Crestmoon, some will die fighting, some will scatter. That's how territory acquisition works. You should know that, First Blood. Your ancestors built empires on the same principle. My ancestors built empires that lasted centuries." Kaelin's voice went colder. "Yours will collapse within a generation, because you're building on fear instead of loyalty. And fear only works until someone scarier comes along." Tyrion's eyes narrowed. "Is that someone supposed to be you?" "Maybe." Kaelin held his gaze. "Or maybe it's the concept that wolves don't have to slaughter each other to survive. That there's a better way than constant territorial wars that bleed everyone dry. Idealism." Tyrion shook his head. "That's what I expected from someone trained by Shadowfang. They're good at making warriors, not so good at understanding reality. The South isn't some noble training ground. It's a war zone. And war zones have 2 kinds of wolves, winners and dead. Then let's make this simple." Kaelin took a step forward. "You want Black Hollow's territory. I want your pack to leave us alone. We settle it the old way. Single combat. You and me. Winner takes everything." The clearing went silent. Even the witnesses looked shocked. Garrett tensed beside her, but didn't object. Senna's hand moved to her weapon, ready to defend Kaelin if Tyrion tried anything. Tyrion studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was the smile of a predator who'd just been offered easy prey. "You're serious?" "Completely. You know I've killed 16 wolves in formal challenges, including 3 alphas. I'm not some politician who talks big but can't back it up. I'm a warrior who's earned every scar." "Good." Kaelin's voice didn't waver. "Then you'll appreciate a real fight instead of slaughtering wolves who can barely defend themselves. Unless you're afraid that the dead Luna might actually be dangerous." It was a calculated insult, a direct challenge to his pride. Tyrion's expression darkened. His body language shifted into something more aggressive, but he didn't attack. Couldn't. Not under white flag. "Fine," he said, voice like gravel. "Tomorrow at dawn. This same clearing, single combat to the death. Winner takes Black Hollow's territory and whatever remains of the pack. Loser dies and is forgotten. Standard terms." "Standard terms," Kaelin agreed. "Except one addition. If I win, Crestmoon leaves Black Hollow alone permanently. No raids, no border conflicts, no further aggression. You find your empire somewhere else. And if I win, then Black Hollow is yours. Do whatever you want with it." Kaelin forced herself to say the words despite the taste they left in her mouth. "The wolves can choose to join you or scatter. Either way, my interference ends." Tyrion considered, then nodded. "Agreed." His smile returned. "I'll enjoy this. It's been too long since someone gave me a real challenge. See you at dawn, little Luna. Try not to die of fear before then." He turned and walked away. Kessa followed, both of them moving with the easy confidence of wolves who'd already won. The witnesses dispersed quickly, probably eager to spread word about what was coming. When they were alone, Garrett finally spoke. "That was the stupidest thing I've ever seen anyone do. You just bet the entire pack on your ability to kill one of the most dangerous alphas in the South." "I know." Kaelin's hands were shaking. She clenched them into fists. But it was the only option that didn't involve watching 80 warriors die trying to hold off 500. At least this way, only one of us has to die. What if it's you? Senna asked quietly. What happens to Black Hollow then? Then you run. Kaylin met her eyes. You take anyone who'll follow and you get as far from Crest Moon territory as possible. Find another pack. Go rogue. Whatever it takes to survive. Don't let my failure trap you. Senna's jaw clenched. We're not running. If you fall, we fall fighting. That's what loyalty means. No. Kaylin's voice turned sharp. Loyalty means surviving, means living to rebuild. Dying for pride is what got Black Hollow into this mess in the first place. If I lose tomorrow, you scatter and you live. That's an order. Neither Garrett nor Senna argued further, but their expressions made it clear they had no intention of obeying. They'd follow her into death if that's where this led. The realization made Kaylin's chest tight. This was what leadership meant. Not just making decisions, but carrying the weight of wolves who'd chosen to trust you. They walked back to the pack house in silence. Word had already spread. Wolves lined the path, watching her with expressions that mixed hope and desperation. They'd heard about the challenge, knew their future hung on a single fight. Some looked at her like she was a savior, others like she was insane. Maybe both were true. Inside the pack house, Riker waited in the main hall. He looked better than last night, but still carried himself like a broken thing. His eyes found Kaylin immediately. Is it true? You challenged Tyrion Blackridge to single combat? Yes. Kaylin didn't slow down. She headed toward the stairs leading to the upper chambers. That's suicide. Riker followed her. He's killed alphas twice your age with 10 times your experience. What makes you think you can beat him? I don't think I can beat him. Kaylin stopped at the base of the stairs, turned to face him. I know I have to. There's a difference. Thinking is about probability. Knowing is about necessity. That's not enough. Riker's voice held genuine concern. It sounded strange coming from him. You need strategy. Tyrion fights dirty when he has to. He'll exploit every weakness. You need to be prepared for... I've spent 2.5 years preparing. Kaylin cut him off. Training with warriors who make Tyrion look soft. Learning from elders who've forgotten more about combat than he'll ever know. Unlocking power he doesn't even know exists. She moved closer, forcing him to meet her eyes. I'm not the weak Luna you remember, Riker. I'm something else entirely. And tomorrow Tyrion finds out what that means. She started up the stairs. Riker called after her. Why are you doing this? Really, you could have walked away. Let Black Hollow fall. Made us pay for what we did to you. Why risk your life for a pact that destroyed you? Kaylin paused, looked back at him over her shoulder. Because someone needs to prove that strength isn't just about who can hurt others the most. That real power comes from choosing to protect even when it's hard, even when it's not deserved. You taught me what not to be, Riker. Now I'm teaching the world what leaders should be. She continued upstairs, found the chamber they'd given her. It was sparse but functional. She stripped off her armor and stood in front of the cracked mirror on the wall, studied her reflection. Silver white hair, silver amber eyes, scars from training that mapped her transformation like a story written in pain. The girl who'd stood in this pack house 3 years ago was gone completely, burned away by rejection and winter and the brutal forge of Shadowfang. What remained was harder, colder, capable of things that would have terrified her old self. But underneath the warrior's exterior, something else stirred. The same stubborn flame that had kept her moving through the snow. That had refused to die when dying was easier. That had chosen to fight even when fighting seemed impossible. That flame wasn't about rage or revenge anymore. It was about proving that survival alone wasn't enough. That you had to do something with the life you'd clawed your way into keeping. A knock on the door. Senna entered without waiting for permission. She carried a bundle wrapped in cloth, set it on the bed and unwrapped it carefully. Inside were vials of thick liquid in various colors, medical supplies, bandages, and several small pouches that smelled like herbs and something sharper. What is this? Kaylin asked. Advantage. Senna held up one of the vials. This one speeds healing during a fight. Not much, but enough to matter. This one, she indicated a dark red vial, temporarily boosts strength. Lasts maybe 10 minutes, but makes you hit harder. And this, she picked up a small pouch, goes on your claws when you shift. Makes wounds harder to heal. Old rogue trick. Kaelin stared at the supplies. You want me to cheat? I want you to survive. Senna's expression was fierce. Tyrion will use every advantage he has. He's bigger, stronger, more experienced. If you fight fair, you die. If you die, we all suffer. So yes, I want you to cheat. I want you to fight as dirty as necessary to win, because honorable deaths don't rebuild packs. The logic was sound. Brutal, but sound. Kaelin picked up the red vial, studied it in the lamplight. How much does this cost? What's the price for using it? Senna hesitated. It burns through your system fast. You'll be exhausted after. Weak for maybe a day. But the fight should be over by then, one way or another. And the wound poison makes you dangerous even when you're losing. One good strike with it, and Tyrion's own healing works against him. The poison spreads faster when his body tries to repair the damage. Senna set the pouch down carefully. But here's the reality. These give you a chance. They don't guarantee anything. Tyrion's still lethal, still experienced. You'll need everything, skill, power, luck, and yes, dirty tricks, to walk away from this. Kaelin nodded slowly. Put the vial back down. Thank you. For this. For staying. For not running when you had the chance. Where would I run to? Senna's voice was quiet. You're the first thing worth believing in that I've seen in years. If you die tomorrow, at least you'll die trying to be better than the rest of us. That's more than most wolves manage. She left before Kaelin could respond. The door closed softly. Kaelin was alone with her thoughts, and the supplies that might keep her alive, and the crushing weight of knowing that hundreds of wolves would live or die based on what happened when dawn came. She spent the rest of the day preparing, meditated like the elders had taught her, stretched and moved through combat forms until her body remembered every strike and block and counter. Ate a meal that tasted like ash because her stomach was twisted too tight for hunger. Tried to rest and couldn't because her mind kept showing her all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. Night fell. The pack house went quiet. But Kaelin could feel the tension thrumming through every wall. Wolves who couldn't sleep, couldn't stop thinking about what dawn would bring. She wasn't alone in her fear. The entire pack was drowning in it. She stood on the balcony again as midnight approached, stared up at the stars that looked cold and distant and indifferent to wolf politics. Somewhere out there, Tyrion was probably sleeping peacefully, confident in his victory, certain that tomorrow he'd kill the upstart First Blood and claim another territory for his empire. Maybe he was right. Maybe her confidence was just desperation wearing a warrior's mask. Maybe she'd made a terrible mistake and tomorrow would prove it in blood. But doubt was a luxury she couldn't afford. Leaders didn't get to hesitate, didn't get to second guess. They made decisions and lived with the consequences no matter how brutal. Kaelin went back inside, lay down on the bed fully clothed, closed her eyes, let her mind drift to Shadowfang, to Vera's cold eyes and harder training, to the elders who'd unlocked the power sleeping in her blood, to 2.5 years of being broken down and rebuilt into something that could survive anything. She wasn't ready for tomorrow. No one ever was. But ready or not, dawn would come. And she'd face it the same way she'd faced everything else since the night she was cast out, by refusing to break, by choosing to fight, by becoming exactly what the world needed her to be, even if it destroyed her in the process. Sleep finally came in fragments. Dreams of snow and blood and Riker's face the night he rejected her. Dreams of Vera's voice telling her to get up and fight. Dreams of standing over Tyrion's body and not knowing if she'd won or if this was just what dying felt like. She woke to gray pre-dawn light. Her body was already moving before her mind fully caught up. She dressed in simple combat clothes. No armor. Single combat tradition required minimal protection. Strapped weapons to her body more out of habit than necessity. The fight would be in wolf form, claws and teeth and raw power deciding who lived. She picked up the red vial, the strength booster, held it up to the light. Senna had called it cheating. But survival had never been about fairness. It had always been about doing whatever was necessary to see another day. She tucked the vial into her belt, took the poison pouch as well. If dirty tricks were what it took to protect 300 wolves, then she'd fight as dirty as required. Garrett met her at the pack house entrance. He wore full armor and carried enough weapons to outfit 3 wolves. His expression was grim but determined. Ready? As I'll ever be. The walk to the clearing felt both too long and too short. Wolves lined the path again. More this time. Every pack member who could move had turned out to watch her leave. Some reached out to touch her as she passed. Others just watched with expressions that broke her heart. They believed in her, trusted that somehow she'd save them. The weight of it was almost unbearable. Senna fell in step beside her halfway to the border. Didn't say anything, just walked. Silent support that meant more than words. The clearing came into view as the sun broke the horizon. Tyrion was already there with his beta and what looked like 50 Crestmoon warriors. The witnesses had gathered as well, representatives from 6 different packs who'd serve as neutral observers. One of them would declare the winner and enforce the terms. Tyrion looked fresh and confident. He'd stripped to the waist, showing a body covered in scars and ritual markings. His eyes found Kylin, and he smiled. That predator's smile that said he'd already won and this was just formality. Kylin walked into the center of the clearing, felt the packed earth under her boots, smelled morning dew and pine, and the copper scent of old blood from previous fights held here. This ground had seen challenges before. Would see them again. Life and death decided by combat was the oldest tradition wolves had. The head witness stepped forward, an ancient male from one of the neutral territories. His voice carried despite his age. Standard terms. Single combat to the death. Both parties have agreed. Once the fight begins, no interference from either side. The victor takes Black Hollow territory and commands the loyalty of its pack. The loser dies and is forgotten. Any questions? None, Tyrion said. None, Kylin echoed. Then shift and begin when ready. The witness stepped back, left the center empty except for Kylin and Tyrion facing each other across 30 feet of ground. Tyrion shifted first. His transformation was brutal and fast. Within seconds, a massive dark brown wolf stood where the man had been. He was enormous, easily twice Kylin's size when she shifted. Muscles rippled under his coat. His teeth were daggers. His eyes glowed with absolute certainty. Kylin closed her eyes, reached for her wolf, found it waiting, eager, ready. She shifted. The transformation was smooth now, natural. Her silver-white wolf emerged, smaller than Tyrion but faster, built for endurance and precision instead of raw power. The ancient markings on her coat glowed faint blue in the rising sun. They circled each other. Neither rushing, both looking for openings, for weaknesses, for the first mistake that would decide everything. The clearing was silent except for the sound of paws on earth and breathing. Everyone watching knew they were witnessing something significant. Not just a challenge for territory, but a clash between old ways and new, between brutality and transformation, between the Alpha who ruled through fear and the Luna who'd survived being destroyed. Tyrion attacked first. He was fast for his size. Closed the distance in 3 massive strides. Kylin dodged left. His jaws snapped closed where her throat had been. She countered with a strike at his shoulder. Connected. Drew blood. First mark. They separated. Circled again. Tyrion's eyes narrowed. He'd expected to end this quickly. The fact that she'd landed a hit at all had surprised him. Good. Surprise was an advantage. He came at her again. This time she didn't dodge. Couldn't. He'd cut off her escape routes. She met him head on. They collided like thunder. The impact drove her back, but she kept her feet, snapped at his face, missed. His teeth caught her foreleg. Pain exploded. She felt bone crack. She twisted free, limped backward. Blood was running down her leg. Tyrion stalked forward. Confident now. He'd hurt her. Broken something. This was going exactly how he'd planned. Kylin's mind raced through the pain. She couldn't win in straight combat. He was too big, too strong, too experienced. She needed to change the dynamic, needed to make this fight about something other than raw power. She feinted left. Tyrion bought it, committed to blocking. She reversed direction, got under his guard, raked her claws down his exposed belly. The wound poison from Senna's pouch sank into the cuts. Tyrion howled, spun, caught her across the face with one massive paw. She flew backward, hit the ground hard, tasted blood. Get up. Vera's voice in her memory. You don't have the luxury of staying down. Kylin forced herself to her feet. Her leg was screaming. Her vision was blurred. But she was still moving, still fighting, still refusing to break no matter what hit her. Tyrion was bleeding from the belly wounds. They should have been healing already, but the poison was slowing the process, making each injury last longer, work harder. He realized what she'd done. His expression shifted from confidence to rage. "You poisoned your claws!" His mental voice came through the way dominant wolves could communicate in shifted form. "Cheating, surviving," Kaelin sent back. "There's a difference." He charged, not tactical anymore, just pure rage. She rolled under the attack, came up behind him, bit down on his hindquarters, tasted more blood. He kicked out, caught her in the ribs. She felt something crack, was thrown clear, landed badly. Her broken leg gave out completely. She couldn't stand, couldn't get her feet under her. Tyrion turned, saw her down, moved in for the kill. This was it, the moment where either her power woke up or she died. Kaelin reached deep, past her wolf, past the training, past everything Shadowfang had taught her, reached for the bloodline itself, for the ancient power that the elders said lived in her bones, for the Vale legacy that had survived impossible things for thousands of years. Power answered. It roared up through her like fire. Her eyes blazed silver white. The markings on her coat flared bright enough to make watching wolves shield their eyes. Her broken bones knit back together with audible cracks. Her wounds closed, and when she stood again, she stood taller, stronger, radiating power that made even Tyrion hesitate. This was First Blood awakening, the moment when dormant power recognized mortal danger and decided survival meant shattering every limit. Kaelin's wolf grew. Not much, but enough. Her teeth lengthened, her claws became like steel, and in her eyes burned the certainty of a bloodline that had never accepted defeat. "Now we fight for real," she sent to Tyrion. "Show me what an empire builder is really worth." They clashed again. This time the fight was different. Kaelin moved with speed that shouldn't be possible, hit with force that drove Tyrion back. The power flowing through her was intoxicating and terrifying. She could feel it burning through her reserves, knew it wouldn't last, but while it did, she was magnificent and deadly and absolutely unstoppable. Tyrion fought desperately now, realized too late that he'd underestimated her completely. This wasn't just some trained warrior. This was First Blood fully awakened. This was ancient power that his modern alpha strength couldn't match. Kaelin caught him by the throat, bore him down to the ground. Her jaws tightened. She could feel his pulse against her teeth. Could end this right now. Could kill him and claim victory and save Black Hollow. But something made her pause. Some last fragment of the girl who'd been weak, who'd been rejected, who'd known what it felt like to be helpless and at someone else's mercy. She released him, stepped back, shifted to human form, stood there naked and bleeding and glowing with residual power. Her voice came out amplified, loud enough for every watching wolf to hear. "You're beaten. Acknowledge it and live. Keep fighting and die. Your choice." Tyrion shifted back as well. He was bleeding from a dozen wounds. His belly was torn open. His throat bore the marks of her teeth. He stared at her with an expression that mixed shock, rage, and grudging respect. "Why?" he asked. His voice was rough. "Why let me live? Because killing you proves nothing." Kaelin's eyes blazed. "Because the world has enough dead alphas and not enough leaders who understand that mercy is strength too. You want to build an empire? Build one worth inheriting. Build one that doesn't require constant warfare to survive. Build one that future generations will respect instead of despise." She looked at the watching wolves, at both sides frozen in shock, at the witnesses who were supposed to declare a winner. "Black Hollow is mine. Not through conquest, through choice. Any wolf who wants to stay can stay. Any who want to leave can go without pursuit. And Tyrion," she turned back to him, "you go back to Crestmoon and tell every alpha in the south what you saw here today. Tell them the old ways are ending. Tell them a new kind of leader is rising. Tell them that the rejected Luna they thought was dead has become something they're not prepared to handle." She swayed. The power was fading fast. Her broken bones were starting to hurt again. Her wounds were reopening. The price of channeling that much First Blood energy was about to hit her like a hammer. Garrett was there suddenly, supporting her, wrapping a cloak around her body. Get her back to the pack house. Now. Kaelin looked at Tyrion one last time. He was staring at her like he'd seen a ghost, like his entire understanding of power had just been rewritten. Consider this a lesson, she said, voice fading. Real strength isn't about who can kill the most wolves. It's about who can survive impossible things and choose to be better anyway. Then darkness took her. She felt herself falling, felt Garrett catch her, felt the world spinning away into nothing as her body finally gave up after pushing past every limit it had. The last thing she heard before unconsciousness claimed her was the sound of 300 wolves howling. Not in mourning, not in fear, but in victory. In celebration, in absolute defiant joy that their impossible Luna had done the impossible thing and saved them all. Kaylin woke to pain that felt like her entire body had been shattered and reassembled wrong. Every breath was agony. Every heartbeat sent fire through her veins. She tried to move and immediately regretted it when white-hot suffering exploded through her ribs. Don't. Senna's voice came from somewhere to her left. You've been out for 3 days. Your body is still recovering from whatever you did in that clearing. Kaylin forced her eyes open. Stone ceiling. The same chamber in the pack house. Weak afternoon light filtered through a small window. Senna sat in a chair beside the bed, looking exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept much. Did we win? Kaylin's voice came out as a rasp. Senna's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile. You don't remember? Fragments. Kaylin tried to organize the chaos in her head. Fighting Tyrion. The power awakening. Standing over him. Then nothing. You beat him. Senna leaned forward. Not just beat. You destroyed everything he thought he knew about power. Then you let him live. The witnesses declared you victor. Tyrion withdrew his forces. Black Hollow is secure. The relief should have felt better. Should have been overwhelming. But all Kaylin felt was emptiness and bone-deep exhaustion. She'd won. Saved 300 wolves from slaughter. Proven that strength could mean something other than brutality. And the cost was written in every broken bone and torn muscle in her body. How bad is it? She asked. You channeled more first blood power than your body could handle. Senna's voice was clinical, but concern bled through. Broke both legs again. Shattered 3 ribs, tore muscles in your back and shoulders. The healers say you're lucky to be alive. That much power should have killed you. But it didn't. Kaylin closed her eyes. Because Veils survive. That's what we do. We endure what should break us. There's a cost to that. Senna's hand rested on Kaylin's arm. A light touch. Careful not to cause more pain. The healers also say you can't do that again. Not for months. Maybe not ever, without serious consequences. You burn through reserves that take years to rebuild. Next time you channel that much power, it might actually kill you. The warning settled over Kaylin like a weight. She'd unlocked something in that clearing, touched the full potential of her bloodline, and learned that even ancient power had limits, that survival sometimes meant accepting you couldn't always be strong enough, that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was just reality. The door opened. Garrett entered carrying a tray with water and something that smelled like broth. He set it on the table beside the bed. His scarred face was unreadable, but his eyes held relief. You're awake. Good. We need to talk about what happens next. Next? Kaylin tried to sit up. Failed. Her body wouldn't cooperate. Can next wait until I can stand without passing out? No. Garrett's voice was firm, but not unkind. Because while you were unconscious, the world kept moving. And it moved in directions you need to know about. He pulled up another chair, sat heavily. Senna poured water and helped Kaylin drink. The liquid hurt going down, but she needed it. First, Garrett said. Tyrion kept his word. Withdrew completely. But he sent a message before he left. Said you were right. That empire building through constant warfare was exhausting and unsustainable. That maybe there was a better way. He wants to meet again in 3 months. Neutral ground. To discuss possible alliance instead of conquest. Kaylin absorbed that. Tyrion was ruthless, but he wasn't stupid. He'd seen something in that clearing that changed his calculations. Seen that fighting wolves like her wasn't worth the cost when cooperation might yield better results. It wasn't friendship. It was pragmatic adaptation. But it was a start. Second, Garrett continued. Word has spread. 5 other packs have sent representatives wanting to meet the First Blood who defeated Tyrion Blackridge in single combat. Some want alliances. Some want to test you themselves. Some just want to see if the stories are true. You've become famous whether you wanted to or not. Fame was dangerous. Fame meant being a target. But fame also meant influence, meant the ability to shape how other packs thought about power and leadership. It was a weapon if she knew how to use it. Third, Garrett's expression darkened. Riker has asked to speak with you, privately. Says he needs to say things that can't wait. Kaylin's jaw tightened. She wasn't ready for that conversation. Wasn't ready to face the male who destroyed her and started this whole brutal transformation. But avoiding him wouldn't make the past disappear, wouldn't resolve the festering wound at the heart of Black Hollow's hierarchy. Send him in, she said quietly. Let's get this over with. Garrett and Senna exchanged glances, then both stood. Garrett paused at the door. If you need us, just call. We'll be right outside. They left. Kaylin was alone with the pain and the weak afternoon light, and the knowledge that whatever came next would hurt in different ways than broken bones. Riker entered 5 minutes later. He looked worse than before, thinner, more haunted, like the weight of his failures had finally crushed whatever pride he'd been clinging to. He stopped just inside the door, didn't approach the bed, just stood there looking at her with an expression that mixed shame and something that might have been grief. You came back, he said, voice rough. After everything. After I threw you away like you were nothing. You came back and saved us all. I didn't do it for you. Kaylin kept her voice flat. I did it because 300 wolves didn't deserve to die for your mistakes. I know. Riker's hands clenched at his sides. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. Don't deserve your mercy. Don't deserve to even be in the same room as you. But I needed to say this face to face. I was wrong. About everything. About you. About what strength means. About how to lead. Words are easy. Kaylin met his eyes. Actions are what matter. And your actions destroyed me. Took a girl who trusted you and broke her so completely that she wanted to die in the snow. Do you understand that? Do you understand what you did? Yes. Riker's voice cracked. I understand now. Too late. Years too late. But I understand. He took a step closer. Stopped when Kaylin's expression hardened. I've spent every day since you left watching Black Hollow fall apart, watching wolves die because I was too arrogant to see that the problem was me, that rejecting you broke something sacred, that the mate bond wasn't weakness, it was the only real strength I had. The mate bond is severed. Kaylin's voice was ice. You made sure of that. There's no going back. I know. Riker's shoulders sagged. I'm not asking to go back. I'm not stupid enough to think you'd ever want that. I'm just asking, his voice dropped to almost a whisper, for you to tell me how to live with what I've done. How to wake up every day knowing I destroyed the one person who might have actually made me better. The question hung between them, raw and desperate and completely genuine. This wasn't manipulation. This was a broken alpha trying to find a reason not to walk into the wilderness and let the cold take him. And despite everything, despite the pain and humiliation and years of suffering, Kaylin felt something shift inside her. Not forgiveness. She wasn't ready for that. Might never be. But understanding, because she'd been broken too, had spent months wanting to die, had learned the hard way that survival required finding purpose beyond pain, required choosing to become something other than your worst moments. You live with it by being better, Kaylin said. Her voice was quiet but firm. You stop being the alpha who rules through fear and start being the leader who protects through wisdom. You take every lesson this failure taught you, and you use it to make sure no other wolf suffers what I suffered. You earn redemption not through words, but through decades of choosing differently. Riker's eyes were wet. And if I can't? If I'm too broken, then you step aside. Kaylin held his gaze. You let someone else lead who isn't carrying your particular damage. There's no shame in admitting you're not equipped for the role anymore. The shame is in holding on to power you can't wield properly just because walking away feels like defeat. Riker was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked her. He knelt. Right there on the stone floor, lowered his head, the formal submission posture that alphas never took. Black Hollow is yours, he said, voice steady despite the tears on his face. Not just in practice, in truth. I'm stepping down, surrendering my title. You've earned it. Through survival, through transformation, through being strong enough to save us despite having every reason to let us burn. Stand up. Kaylin's voice was sharp. I don't want your title, don't want your throne, don't want anything that ties me to who you were. Then what do you want? Riker looked up. desperate for guidance. I want Black Hollow to survive without needing an alpha who rules through dominance. Kaylin's words came slowly, carefully, like she was building something fragile that might shatter if handled wrong. I want a pack structure where power is distributed, where decisions are made by council instead of decree, where strength is measured by how well you protect the vulnerable instead of how many wolves fear you. That's not how packs work. Riker's voice held doubt. Someone has to lead. Someone has to make the hard calls. Then we create a new way. Kaylin's eyes blazed despite her weakness. The old pack structures are dying all across the South. You said it yourself. Everything is falling apart. Maybe it's falling apart because the foundation was rotten, because systems built on brutality eventually consume themselves. Maybe what rises from the ashes needs to be something completely different. She paused, let her breathing steady. This was the moment. The choice that would define not just her future, but the future of every wolf who'd chosen to follow her. I'll stay, she said, but not as alpha. As guardian. I'll protect Black Hollow, fight its wars, defend its borders. But I won't rule it. That authority goes to a council, 5 wolves chosen by the pack. They make decisions together, check each other's power, and if they fail, if they become corrupt or cruel, the pack can remove them and choose new ones. Riker stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. That's insane. No pack has ever survived what we're about to face. Kaylin's voice turned hard. The Southern Territories are collapsing. Resources are scarce. Rival packs are desperate. The old ways are dying whether we accept it or not. So we either adapt or we die with them. I choose adaptation. And if the council makes decisions you disagree with, then I live with it. Kaylin's expression was fierce, unless those decisions threaten the pack's survival. Then I step in. But only then. The rest of the time, I'm a guardian, not a ruler. There's a difference. Riker processed that slowly, then nodded. It was the nod of someone who'd finally accepted that his understanding of the world had been fundamentally wrong. I'll support this. Whatever you need. However I can help. You can help by being honest with the pack. Kaylin's voice softened slightly. Tell them what you did to me. Tell them why it was wrong. Let them see that even alphas make mistakes. That power doesn't mean perfection. That accountability matters more than pride. That'll destroy what's left of my authority. Good. Kaylin's smile was sad. Authority built on fear and pride should be destroyed. What grows back will be stronger because it's rooted in truth instead of performance. Riker stood slowly, looked at her one more time. You're wiser than I ever was, than I ever could be. He moved toward the door, paused with his hand on the frame. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I am. I know. Kaylin closed her eyes. Now go. I need to rest. The door closed. She was alone again. The conversation had exhausted her more than the fight with Tyrion. Broken bones would heal. But the wounds between her and Riker ran deeper than bone, ran all the way to the soul, and some wounds never fully healed. They just scarred over and became part of the landscape you learned to navigate. The days blurred together. Kaylin's body healed slowly, painfully. The healers worked constantly, using herbs and old techniques that helped accelerate her natural recovery. But first blood healing had its limits. She'd pushed too hard, broken too much. Some damage took time and patience instead of power. While she recovered, the pack transformed around her. Riker kept his word, called a gathering and admitted everything. Told them about rejecting Kaylin, about the cruelty, about how his failures had nearly destroyed them all. Some wolves were angry, others were stunned, but none could deny the truth anymore. Then Kaylin's proposal was presented. A council instead of absolute alpha rule. 5 wolves chosen by pack vote to share authority. It was radical, unprecedented. Most of the older wolves were skeptical, but the younger ones, the ones who'd watched their parents suffer under brutal leadership, they supported it with fierce determination. The vote happened on a cold morning 2 weeks after Kaylin woke. 300 wolves gathered in the main clearing, raised their voices in support or opposition. When it was counted, the council structure won by a narrow margin. Not overwhelming, but enough. The 5 council members were chosen the same day. Garrett for his tactical knowledge and decades of service. Senna for her warrior's perspective and willingness to admit past mistakes. An older female named Moira who'd lost children to the old system and wanted change, a young male named Cade who represented the next generation, and surprisingly, Riker, because the pack recognized that his experience, however tainted by failure, still held value if properly checked by others. Kaylin was named Guardian by unanimous decision. No one opposed it. She'd earned the title in blood and power and the willingness to sacrifice herself for wolves who'd once destroyed her. She accepted standing on the pack house steps, still weak but able to move without assistance now. The pack gathered below looked different than they had weeks ago. Less defeated, more hopeful, like they'd remembered what it felt like to believe in something. "I'm not a savior," Kaylin said, her voice carried across the clearing. "I'm just a wolf who refused to die, who got angry enough to survive, who learned that real strength isn't about dominating others. It's about enduring impossible things and choosing to be better than what broke you." She paused, let her eyes scan the gathered wolves, saw faces she recognized from the rejection ceremony. Wolves who'd laughed, who'd mocked, who'd watched her be thrown into the snow. They looked ashamed now, haunted by participation in cruelty they couldn't take back. "What happened to me was wrong," Kaylin continued. "What this pack became under brutal leadership was wrong. But wrong things don't have to define us forever. We can choose differently, can build something better, can prove that wolves are capable of more than violence and territorial warfare." Her voice grew stronger. "The old packs are dying, the old systems are failing, and what rises from those ashes, that's up to us. We can repeat the same patterns, same cruelty, same inevitable collapse, or we can become something new, something that future generations will look back on and say, that's when it changed. That's when wolves remembered they were more than predators." She raised her hand. The gesture brought absolute silence. This council isn't perfect. Nothing built by imperfect creatures ever is. But it's a start, a foundation, and if we protect it, if we nurture it, if we refuse to let fear and pride corrupt it, then maybe Black Hollow becomes the first pack to survive the coming storm. Maybe we become proof that adaptation is stronger than tradition, that innovation beats stagnation, that choosing differently is the only real power that matters. The clearing erupted in howls, not the desperate hope of before, something deeper, something that sounded like wolves who'd found purpose beyond mere survival, who'd glimpsed a future worth fighting for. Kaylin stepped back. Let the council members move forward. This was their moment now, their burden to carry. She'd done what she came to do, proven that the weak Luna could become strong, that rejection didn't have to be ending, that transformation was possible if you were willing to endure the fire that made it real. Spring came slowly to the northern territories. Snow melted, green things pushed through dead earth, life returning after winter's brutality. Black Hollow changed with the seasons. The new council structure was messy and imperfect, but it worked. Decisions took longer, required compromise. But they were better decisions, more thoughtful, less driven by ego or fear. Trade agreements were established with neighboring packs, not through conquest but through negotiation. Resources were shared, borders were respected. It wasn't friendship exactly, more like mutual recognition that cooperation served everyone's interests better than constant warfare. Tyrion kept his word about the meeting, arrived at the 3-month mark with minimal escort, sat across from Kaylin and the council in a neutral clearing. His wounds from their fight had healed, but he carried himself differently now. Less arrogant, more calculating in the way of someone who'd learned an expensive lesson. "You've built something interesting here," he said, looking at the 5 council members. "Unusual. Maybe even smart. If it lasts. It'll last as long as we protect it," Kaylin said. "As long as we remember why we built it. The moment we forget, the moment we slide back into old patterns, it'll collapse. But that's true of everything worth having." Tyrion nodded slowly. "I came to propose an alliance, not absorption, not conquest, partnership. Crest Moon and Black Hollow working together, sharing resources and intelligence, presenting a united front against common threats." "What do you get out of it?" Senna asked. Her voice was sharp with suspicion. "Stability," Tyrion said, "and proof that my pack can evolve. That strength doesn't always have to mean domination." He looked at Kaelin. "You showed me something in that clearing, showed me that the wolves who survive longest aren't the ones who fight hardest. They're the ones who know when to fight and when to build. I want Crestmoon to survive, which means adapting. The council debated for an hour. Arguments on both sides. Risk versus reward. History versus potential. Finally, they voted. 3 in favor, 2 opposed. The alliance was approved with conditions and oversight. Kaylin watched it happen and felt something shift inside her. This was what real leadership looked like. Not one wolf making decrees, but multiple perspectives finding common ground. It was slower, harder, required patience she'd had to learn the brutal way, but it was sustainable in ways that Alpha Rule never could be. As spring turned to summer, Black Hollow grew stronger. New wolves joined, refugees from collapsed packs who'd heard about the council structure, who wanted to be part of something different. The population grew from 300 to 500, then 700. Not through conquest, but through choice. With growth came new challenges. Resources stretched thin, housing insufficient, old grudges between wolves from different territories. The council worked constantly to manage the expansion, made mistakes, corrected them, learned as they went. Kaylin served as guardian, trained warriors, strengthened defenses, mediated disputes when her authority was needed. But she didn't rule, didn't make decisions for others, just protected the space where better decisions could be made. She found herself on the packhouse balcony often, the same place where she'd stood before the challenge, looking out at territory that had once been her prison and was now something else entirely. Not home exactly, but close enough. Senna joined her one evening as sunset painted the sky red and gold. The warrior had become something like a friend. Not close, too much history for that. But respect had grown between them, recognition that they'd both changed in ways that made past cruelty seem like it belonged to different people. "Do you ever regret it?" Senna asked. "Coming back? Saving us? Choosing this instead of walking away?" "Every day," Kaylin admitted. Then she smiled slightly. "And every day I choose it again anyway. Because regret means caring, means being invested enough to wish things were different. And caring, even when it hurts, is better than the alternative." "What's the alternative?" "Being so dead inside that nothing touches you." Kaylin's voice was quiet. "I was headed there. In Shadowfang, becoming a perfect weapon with no heart left. Coming back here, facing everything that broke me. It forced me to stay human, stay vulnerable, stay capable of being hurt." She paused. "That's terrifying. But it's also what makes survival mean something more than just breathing." Senna was quiet for a moment. "I never apologized properly. For what I said at your rejection, for wanting to replace you, for being part of the cruelty. You apologized." Kaylin glanced at her. "After the assassination attempt. I remember. Words aren't enough." Senna's jaw clenched. "I need you to know. If I could go back, if I could change what I did." "You can't." Kaylin's voice was firm, but not unkind. "None of us can. We just live with it. Make different choices now. Become people who wouldn't make those same mistakes. That's all redemption ever is. Not erasing the past, just refusing to repeat it." Senna nodded slowly. Then, after a long pause, "Thank you. For not being the kind of leader who makes us keep suffering for old failures. For understanding that people can change." "People who want to change can change," Kaylin corrected. "The ones who don't want to, who cling to old patterns because change is scary, they stay broken. You wanted to change, that's why you could." They stood in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon, as stars began appearing in the darkening sky, as the territory below them settled into evening routines, patrols changing shifts, families gathering for meals, children playing near the central clearing, life continuing in ways that would have been impossible months ago. Riker appeared from the interior stairwell. He'd changed too, lost weight, moved with less authority but more purpose. He served on the council but deferred to others more often than not, listened instead of commanded. It was strange seeing him diminished, but also right, like he'd finally found the role he was meant for instead of the one his pride demanded. "Council wants your input on the northern expansion," he said to Kaylin. "Some of the new arrivals are suggesting we establish an outpost near the old border. Would strengthen our position but requires resources we're not sure we have." "What do you think?" Kaylin asked. Riker hesitated, then spoke carefully. "I think it's ambitious. Risky. but probably necessary. If we're going to keep growing, we need better control of our territory. The question is whether we can afford the warriors to staff it. Bring me the full proposal tomorrow, Kaelin said. I'll review it and give the council my assessment. But ultimately, it's your decision, all of yours. I'm just here to tell you if it threatens the pack's survival or not. Riker nodded, started to leave, then stopped. Looked back at Kaelin with an expression that held too many emotions to name. I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. What you've built here, what you've let us become, it's more than I ever managed in 5 years as Alpha. You were right about everything. And he paused. I was a fool who let pride destroy the only good thing I had. The past is gone, Riker. Kaelin's voice was gentle. We can't live there anymore. Can only build something better with the time we have left. He nodded again. Left. Kaelin watched him go and felt the strangest mixture of emotions. Not love. That was dead. Killed the night he struck her. But something softer than hate. Something that recognized he was trying. That effort mattered even when it couldn't fix what was broken. Senna had stayed quiet during the exchange. Now she spoke. Do you think he'll ever forgive himself? No. Kaelin's answer was immediate. And he shouldn't. Some things are too big for self-forgiveness. The best he can do is live with it, use it, let it make him better. But the guilt, that stays. That's the price of the harm he caused. That's brutal. That's honest. Kaelin met her eyes. We don't get to erase our worst moments. Don't get to feel better about things we should feel terrible about. We just get to choose whether that guilt makes us cruel or makes us careful. Riker's choosing careful. That's enough. Summer faded into autumn. The territory turned gold and red. Black Hollow celebrated its first harvest under the new structure. Food stores were full. Warriors were trained. Alliances were stable. The pack had not just survived, but thrived. And everywhere Kaelin looked, she saw evidence that different choices led to different outcomes. That transformation wasn't just possible. It was inevitable if you refused to accept that things had to stay broken. On the anniversary of her return, 1 year since she'd walked back into Black Hollow, a ceremony was held. The pack gathered in the main clearing. A monument was unveiled. Simple stone carved with names. Every wolf who'd died during the collapse. Every victim of the old system. Every life lost to cruelty and pride and the brutal machinery of Alpha rule. Kaelin stood before it with the council beside her. Read the names aloud. Some she recognized. Others were strangers. All were wolves who deserved to be remembered, whose suffering had purchased the lessons that made the present possible. When the reading finished, she spoke to the gathered pack. We built this monument not to celebrate pain, but to remember the cost of forgetting it. Every name here represents a failure, a moment when the pack chose wrong, a wolf who paid the price for that choice. She paused. Let the weight of those words settle. We can't bring them back, can't undo the harm, but we can make sure they didn't die for nothing. We can build a pack where future generations don't end up on monuments like this, where strength means protection instead of domination, where power serves wolves instead of consuming them. Her voice grew stronger. I was almost one of these names. Would have been if circumstances had been slightly different. If Shadowfang hadn't found me. If I'd given up in that frozen creek. If I'd chosen revenge instead of rebuilding. She looked around at hundreds of faces, all listening, all invested. My name isn't here because I refuse to let cruelty have the final word. Because I chose survival not just for myself, but for every wolf who comes after. She stepped back from the monument. Let the moment breathe. That's what this stone means, that we acknowledge the past, learn from it, and commit to building something better. Not perfect. Nothing built by imperfect creatures ever is, but better. Always reaching for better. That's the only legacy worth leaving. The pack howled, long and mournful and defiant all at once. It was the sound of wolves who'd stared into the abyss of their own failures and chosen to climb out instead of falling deeper. The sound of transformation taken root and growing toward light. As winter approached again, the second since Kaelin's return, she found herself thinking about Shadowfang, about Vera and the elders and the fortress that had forged her into something capable of surviving the impossible. She'd sent word months ago, updates about Black Hollow, about the council structure, about alliances and growth and the slow, painful work of building something new. Vera's response came with the first snowfall. A message carried by a Shadowfang scout who looked impressed by Black Hollow's transformation. The letter was written in Vera's precise script, short and brutal in the way of warriors who didn't waste words. You've done what the elders hoped, built something worth protecting, proven that first blood power can create instead of just destroy. Shadowfang is proud. But don't get comfortable. The South's collapse is accelerating, more packs falling, more wolves desperate, more alphas making stupid decisions. You'll be tested again. Probably soon. Stay sharp, stay strong. And remember, survival is never finished. It's just the thing you keep choosing every day until you can't anymore. The letter was signed with Vera's mark. No sentiment, no warmth, just the cold acknowledgement that Kaylin had succeeded in the mission she'd been given, that she'd reshaped what was coming instead of being crushed by it. Kaylin stood on the balcony reading and rereading those words, feeling the truth of them settle into her bones. Vera was right. This wasn't an ending, just a pause. Just a moment of stability before the next crisis, before the next challenge that would test whether Black Hollow's new structure could withstand real pressure. But for now, for this moment, there was peace. The pack was fed and safe and functioning. The council was learning to lead. The alliances were holding, and she was still here, still breathing, still choosing to survive, not just for herself, but for every wolf who'd decided to trust that she meant what she said about building better. That night she dreamed of the frozen creek, of lying in ice water staring up at bare branches. But in the dream she wasn't dying. She was just resting, catching her breath before getting up and continuing the journey. And when she rose in the dream, the creek wasn't empty. It was full of wolves. Hundreds of them, all the ones she'd saved, all the ones who'd chosen to follow her vision of what packs could become. They didn't speak, just watched her with eyes that held trust and hope, and the fragile belief that maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind them, that survival was possible, that transformation wasn't just for individuals but for entire communities if someone was brave enough to lead the way. Kaylin woke with that image burned into her mind, with the weight of those watching wolves pressing down like prophecy. She understood now what the elders had meant, what Vera had been preparing her for. First blood power wasn't just about individual strength. It was about carrying the survival instinct of the entire species, about being the wolf who endured so others could follow, about building bridges between the brutal past and a future that didn't have to repeat the same patterns. She rose before dawn, stood on the balcony watching the sun climb over mountains that looked both harsh and beautiful. The territory spread out before her was scarred and imperfect and still healing from decades of mismanagement. But it was healing, growing stronger, learning to thrive under leadership that valued protection over domination. Below in the clearing, early risers were starting their day. Warriors training, hunters preparing for the day's work, parents tending to children, all of it mundane and precious and exactly what she'd fought to preserve. Not glory, not power, just the simple continuation of life in ways that didn't require constant suffering. Riker emerged from the pack house, saw her on the balcony, climbed the stairs to join her. They stood side by side in silence for a long moment, not comfortable exactly, but no longer hostile. Just two wolves who'd destroyed each other and somehow found a way to exist in the same space without reopening old wounds. "Thank you," Riker said quietly, "for not giving up on us, for being stronger than I ever was." "I'm not stronger." Kaylin's voice was matter-of-fact. "I was just desperate enough to change. You could have done the same, could have chosen differently years ago." She glanced at him. "The difference between us isn't strength. It's that I had nothing left to lose. And wolves with nothing to lose are capable of anything." Riker absorbed that. Then, after a long pause, "Do you think you'll ever leave? Find another territory where the past doesn't follow you?" Kaylin considered. "Maybe someday. When Black Hollow is stable enough to survive without a guardian. When the council structure is so ingrained that backsliding becomes impossible." She smiled slightly. "But that's years away. Maybe decades. Until then," she gestured at the territory, "this is where I'm needed, so this is where I stay. We don't deserve you." "No." Kaylin's voice was gentle. "You don't. But that's not why I stayed. I stayed because 300 wolves deserved better than what they had. Because building something good out of ruins is the only revenge that actually matters. Because proving that transformation is possible is more powerful than any amount of violence. She turned to face him fully. What you did to me was unforgivable. I want you to understand that. There's no absolution coming, no moment where I'll say it's okay now. But, she paused, I've learned that forgiveness isn't about making peace with people who harmed you. It's about refusing to let that harm control your future. I don't forgive you, Riker, but I've stopped letting you define me. And that's close enough. Riker's eyes were wet, but he didn't look away. That's more than I deserve. Yes, Kaylin agreed. It is. Now go make yourself useful to the pack. Earn the second chance you've been given, not through words, through decades of choosing better. He nodded, descended the stairs, left her alone with the rising sun and the weight of everything she'd built, and the absolute certainty that this, right here, right now, was what victory looked like when you stopped measuring it in bodies and started measuring it in futures created. The weeks turned into months. Winter came hard, but Black Hollow weathered it. The new outpost was established. Trade with Crest Moon flourished. 3 more packs approached seeking alliance. The council structure was refined through trial and error, and slowly, gradually, word spread through the southern territories that something new was happening in Black Hollow. Something that might be worth paying attention to. Something that might offer hope that the endless cycle of territorial warfare and pack collapse wasn't inevitable. Kaylin trained warriors and mediated disputes and stood as guardian over a pack that had chosen to become more than its worst impulses. She carried scars both visible and internal, carried memories of rejection and snow and the brutal price of survival. But she also carried something else, something that grew stronger every day. Purpose. Not the desperate purpose of someone trying to prove their worth, but the settled purpose of someone who'd found their place in the world and recognized that fitting into that place required constant work and vigilance and the willingness to adapt when circumstances changed. She was no longer the weak Luna who'd been cast out, but she also wasn't trying to be the opposite of that girl. She was something entirely new, something forged in winter and blood and the absolute refusal to let cruelty have the final word. Something that proved transformation wasn't about becoming perfect. It was about becoming capable of holding pain and power simultaneously, of carrying strength that protected instead of dominated, of building futures even when the past tried to consume you. On the 1-year anniversary of defeating Tyrion, 2 years since her return, Kaylin stood before the pack again. This time not to give orders or issue warnings, just to mark the moment, to acknowledge how far they'd come and how far they still had to go. 2 years ago I came back to Black Hollow expecting to find enemies, she said, voice carrying across the clearing. What I found was something more complicated. Broken wolves who'd broken others because they didn't know a different way. A system that turned survival into cruelty. A pack dying from the inside out. She paused, let her eyes scan the gathered wolves, saw faces that had changed, hardened by struggle, softened by hope, all of them carrying their own scars, their own stories of what they'd survived. We didn't fix it overnight, didn't wave a magic wand and make everything better. We just made different choices. Small ones at first, then bigger ones. We chose counsel over absolute power, chose alliance over conquest, chose adaptation over tradition, and choice by choice, we built something that looks nothing like what came before. Her voice grew stronger. This pack isn't perfect. We still make mistakes, still fight and disagree and struggle with how to balance competing needs. But we're trying. We're learning. We're proving that change is possible if you're willing to endure the discomfort that comes with it. She stepped forward, let the winter wind catch her hair. Black Hollow isn't just a territory anymore. It's an idea. The idea that wolves can be more than predators, that strength can mean protection, that power serves best when it lifts others instead of crushing them. And ideas, once they take root, are impossible to kill. The pack howled. Not in worship, not in blind devotion, but in recognition, in shared understanding that they were part of something larger than themselves, something that might actually outlast them, something worth protecting and nurturing and passing on to wolves not yet born. As the howling faded, Kaylin looked up at the sky, at clouds heavy with snow, at the vast indifferent universe that didn't care about wolf politics or pack structures or individual survival. And she felt something settle in her chest, something that felt like peace. Not the peace of safety or certainty, the peace of knowing she'd done what she set out to do, had survived being destroyed, had transformed that destruction into something constructive, had proven to herself and the world that rejection didn't have to be ending, that being thrown away didn't mean staying discarded, that the girl they'd called weak had contained within her the seeds of something powerful enough to reshape the entire landscape of wolf culture. She was Kaylin Vale, rejected Luna, Shadowfang Guardian, First Blood Warrior, Council Protector, builder of new worlds from the ashes of old ones. And she was finally at peace with the brutal journey that had brought her here. The snow began falling, soft white flakes that covered the territory in clean silence. Kaylin stood in it, let it dust her hair and shoulders, felt the cold that had once nearly killed her, now just a reminder that she'd survived, that survival meant something, that every breath she took was an act of defiance against everyone who'd believed she wasn't strong enough to matter. Winter would pass. Spring would come again. Challenges would arise. Some wolves would choose growth. Others would choose to stay broken. The southern territories would continue their slow collapse, or maybe, just maybe, start following Black Hollow's example. Time would tell. But right now, in this moment, Kaylin allowed herself something she rarely permitted. She allowed herself to feel satisfied, to acknowledge that the impossible thing had been accomplished, to recognize that the weakest wolf in Black Hollow had become exactly what the dying world needed. Not a conqueror, not a savior, just a survivor who'd learned that survival was only the beginning, that what you did with the life you'd clawed your way into keeping, that was what mattered. That was what made the suffering worthwhile. That was what turned pain into purpose and weakness into wisdom. She smiled. It was small and private and full of everything she'd learned. Then she turned and walked back into the pack house, back to the work that never ended, back to the constant vigilance that protecting transformation required, back to the life she'd chosen over and over until choosing it became as natural as breathing. Behind her, the territory settled into evening, wolves returning to their dens, children being tucked into beds, warriors changing shifts, all of it mundane and miraculous, and only possible because one girl had refused to die in the snow. That refusal had changed everything, had rippled out in ways no one could have predicted, had proven that individual choices mattered, that transformation was contagious, that the future didn't have to mirror the past just because that's how it had always been. Kaylin climbed the stairs to her chamber, removed her guardian armor, lay down on the simple bed, closed her eyes. And for the first time since the night she was cast out, she slept without nightmares, without fear, without the crushing weight of wondering if she was strong enough. Because she knew now. She was. Not because she'd become invincible, but because she'd learned that strength wasn't about never breaking. It was about breaking and healing until you became something that could hold both fragility and power without contradiction. She was the rejected Luna who'd become a queen, not through conquest but through transformation, not through dominating others but through refusing to let anyone's cruelty determine her worth. And in the morning, she'd wake up and choose it all over again. Choose survival, choose growth, choose to be the guardian that Black Hollow needed, choose to build a future where no wolf ever had to suffer what she'd suffered just to discover they were stronger than they believed. That was her legacy. Not power, not victory. Just the simple, enduring truth that wolves who survived the impossible carried within them the seeds of transformation. And if they chose to plant those seeds instead of hoarding them, if they chose to build instead of destroy, then maybe the world could become something other than an endless cycle of cruelty. Maybe it could become something worth surviving for.